Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was trained by Sith or Jedi and become Star Wars God. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Sensei. Yeah, why the hell did we come to a fucking desert planet? A young girl who looked to be about 10 or so glared at her teacher who currently finished checking his ship. The girl wasn't very tall, barely standing at 5 feet. She had short messy neck-length platinum blonde hair, which paled in comparison to her master's wild golden mane. "Sia, what have I told you about cursing?" Her master sighed, his blue eyes wandering over to her with a knowing yet bored chastising look. He looked over the pretty young girl whose vibrant pink eyes avoided his. She had a fair smooth complexion and was wearing ant pants with dark red boots and a red sleeveless shirt tucked into her utility belt. The girl gave a quiet grumble, while he went back to overlooking the freighter ship. "Shit," he grumbled. "You just cursed sensei." "I'm a fucking adult," her sensei responded without much care. Sia grunted at the unfairness of it all as she crossed her arms. "And we're here for several reasons," her sensei said as he finished up his look over. "Tatooine is the closest world we could stop at for repairs. Second, a change of scenery. And lastly, you remember our talk of shatterpoints." Sia furrowed her brows as she gave it some thought. "You mean when certain Jedi can see points in a person or conflict that could shape their lives?" Her sensei gave a small shrug and she groaned. "Why are you shrugging, Naruto-sensei?" "Because you're close enough," Naruto Uzumaki answered as he patted down his black robes. Sia looked over her master, wondering how he wasn't hot in all that black. Besides his hooded robes which were burnt orange, he wore all black short-sleeved robes, black pants, black boots. The second part of that is galactic focal points. Through my travels, I have noticed there are Tatooine planets that are the focus and cause of many galactic events. Places such as Coruscant, Kashyyyk, Corella, even this dust ball, Naruto gestured. Besides, there's always something happening on Tatooine. Naruto smirked out of amusement. "If you say so," Sia grumbled. "Doesn't change the fact that it's fucking hot here," Sia huffed quietly to herself and Naruto simply let that one pass. Sia Hen looked towards the ship she had deemed her home for the past year, the Kunoichi. It was beautifully crafted, painted orange, black and crimson. But it was obvious that the ship needed repairs. "Don't look so down, Jinx," Naruto spoke up, using her nickname which caught her attention. "After a year of nothing but practicing using the Force, we can start your lightsaber training," he smirked, which caused her to visibly perk up. She couldn't help but finger the hilt at her belt. Not that long ago, Naruto had pulled out a massive box from somewhere, filled with lightsaber parts. After showing a quick demonstration on the basics in how to construct one, he left her alone, telling her to let the Force guide her. Several hours later, Sia had built a short-bladed lightsaber. The hilt was made of a peculiar type of white metal, wrapped around red leather, the grip styled to be held in a reverse grip. It was a pretty cyan color. She was proud of her creation, however she one day hoped to have a blade as beautiful as her master's. His hilt was intricately made, a black and platinum sleek hilt that was somewhat curved like a katana hilt, 32 centimeters in length with an interesting circular guard. She's only seen her sensei use his lightsaber a handful of times, and every time he called upon the blade she was always mesmerized. The blade that shot out wasn't just a beam of light, but actually looked to be an actual curved-edged sword. It's a black blade from plasma with a gold core and giving off a white glow, extending to 153 centimeters. It truly was a sight to see. "Sensei, what are we going to be doing?" "Well," Naruto sighed, running his hand through his hair. "We need to repair and update the ship a little bit. So I'm going to have to buy another one, then break it apart. Also I need some new parts for Cortana," Naruto muttered in thought while Sia thought of a brilliant idea. "Why don't we just buy a new ship?" "Because I like mine," Naruto answered plainly. Sia rolled her eyes. "Of course he did. The question is, how are we going to get money?" Naruto muttered to himself. He never really had a use for money, or lots of it really. "Ooh, we can try gambling. You have amazing luck, you know." Sia pointed out, which Naruto couldn't really disagree with. Sia began following her sensei to the nearest point of civilization, her hands behind her head as her sensei hummed to himself. I wonder if they have gladiator matches here. You should trust my judgment, your majesty. Tatooine is our best bet. Queen Amidala gave a soft sigh as she turned her eyes away from Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, who was ignoring the protests of her guard, Captain Panaka. She gave a slow nod, which earned a thin smile from the Jedi before he turned to exit the room. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Moss. Chair Jinn's Padawan furrowed his brow slightly, ignoring the irritated guard captain's huff of indignity as he turned to follow his master. Honestly, Obi-Wan was uncomfortable with the idea of going to Tatooine. Aside from the obvious distrust of its rather colorful inhabitants, that is, he had always been more mindful of the future, looking forward with caution as opposed to how his master preferred to look into the moment. Living force indeed, but every time Obi-Wan reached out to the desert world, he got an odd sensation. He had no other word for it besides feeling. It was dark, but not necessarily evil if he was able to gauge it properly. It was more of a twilight if he had to put it to words, and ancient. It felt old, so very old. Not even Master Yoda had a presence quite like that. He sighed again and stopped, looking out a small viewport to the all-consuming blackness of space. He had no idea what the future would bring, but he could feel the Force urging himself closer, so he did not relay his concerns to his master, though he doubted the master would listen anyways. Only time would tell what the future held, as the Force wasn't giving any secrets out. Sensei. What the hell? Naruto looked away from the pod racer he had acquired, to look at Sia, who held an exasperated expression on her face. What? You don't like it? He wondered as he looked over the pod. It wasn't TA's swoop bike, but it was close enough in his opinion. It's not finished yet, not even close, but it should look pretty badass by the time I'm done with it. Naruto smirked as he stroked his chin. Quote, I'm thinking about adding a flamethrower. Where the hell did you even get this? Sia demanded with a brow twitch. They had been on this dustball for about a day. Her sensei mysteriously disappeared once she started her meditation, and now, this. Naruto shrugged as he overlooked his latest project, his face rather thoughtful and untroubled. The original owner no longer needed it. It's a good thing you're not a Jedi, huh? Sia grumbled with Naruto's brow twitching. What do we need this thing for? You planning on merging it with Kunoichi, or? It doesn't work like that, Jinx, Naruto muttered, causing her to roll her eyes. She didn't know technology and mechanics and all that jazz. She is just a stick-up kid from Nar Shaddaa, or at least she was. I'm going to be racing it. There's some big race or something coming up. I plan to win it. Oh yeah, and they just let anyone in their huts. Long as you got money, you can get anywhere. I thought you didn't have any money. Sia raised a brow with Naruto nodding his head. I don't. But the Force is just as good. Naruto grinned, causing her to face palm. Yeah, he definitely isn't a Jedi. Anyway, this race is the day after tomorrow, which is just enough time to trick this baby out. Wait. What about my training? Sia demanded with a groan as Naruto waved her off. Don't shoo me away. You've barely taught me anything combat-wise. Naruto glanced to her as he gave a shrug. Force manipulation requires much more hands-on training. Combat is best learned when you're in the middle of it. Sia could only huff while Naruto rolled his neck and gave a short sigh. Fine, since you're being such a big baby. Draw your weapon, he ordered, causing her to blink in surprise, and she did, drawing out her short saber. I think it would be best to start you with Ataru, considering your short blade at the moment. Sia nodded in understanding as she began to ready herself. Naruto had taught her all 6 forms, well, at least the basics of them. As your training progresses and you get used to combat, you'll learn to adjust the forms to your personal style. For now, I just recommend Ataru because it's simple. Lets you get in close, use your smaller stature to full effect. And all those damn flips you like to do make it hard for you to be targeted. Sia could only laugh while Naruto smirked. Ready? He wondered as he reached for his saber. Wait, sensei. What form do you use? Can't really say, Naruto muttered honestly. I personally use a blend of all 14 forms. I adjust depending on my opponent. Sometimes there is a call for more Vapad. Other times it could be Sorzu, Naruto shared with Sia, humming in understanding. Then she caught something he said. 14. I thought there were only 7. There are 7 Jedi, 7 Sith. Naruto supplied with Sia, blinking a bit. Like I said, I blend them together and adjust if I need to. I call it the Uzumaki form. Naruto chuckled with Sia rolling her eyes. Why? Because you made it? Perhaps, but mainly because of its unpredictability. Naruto shrugged and she looked interested. No one can read your moves if they don't know how you will move, Naruto shared, earning a thoughtful hum from Sia. She will definitely keep that in mind. Just as she thought her sensei was being an idiot again, he showed her he was everything but, well, mostly. Now, enough talk. The younger blonde ground her teeth together, tightened her grip on her blade before launching herself at her sensei. 3 hours later, Sia's stamina finally gave out and she dropped to the hot sandy grow. ND gasping for air while sweat trickled down her body. Damn it, she panted just as Naruto clipped his saber back to his belt, not winded in the least bit, though he was amused. You did better than last time. Which I say is an improvement. Naruto smiled as he glanced over to his clones that had been working on the pod the entire time. You're learning, which is good. Keep it up, and you'll be just as good as me in no time. Maybe, Naruto teased, causing her brow to twitch. But despite the teasing, Sia couldn't help but smile at the praise. Nobody besides her sensei had ever told her she was good at anything. Thank you, sensei. Sia thanked once she finally picked herself up from the sand. Naruto affectionately rubbed her head before nodding over to the city. Now be a good girl and run off to the junk shop. There are some parts one need, he muttered after getting a report from a clone. Sia could only grumble, which Naruto ignored as usual. I scouted around earlier, and there's a junk shop run by a Toydarian named Watto. Should have everything you need, Naruto informed, supplying her with a list. As Sia huffed and got going, she paused. Wait. Turning around, she looked to her sensei. How the hell am I going to pay for any of this shit? Naruto hummed as tapped his chin in thought, which only ticked her off further. I don't know. Be creative. Just don't get arrested or kill anybody. Well, I'm rather lax on the last one. Sometimes you do what you got to do. Naruto chuckled a bit darkly, which only crept out Sia. Don't jinx yourself, Jinx. Naruto waved as Sia swore up and down, taking the walk into town. Damn idiot. Hit him on the nose. Sia turned just as she ducked inside the junk shop and a pit droid came flying towards her. With ease, she thrust out her palm, force pushing the little droid clean across the room into the wall. To the casual observer it looked simply like a rather strong palm strike to the droid's nose. The room's other occupants looked at the droid, then the crack in the wall where the droid hit, then at Sia. She just shrugged. I have a thing about personal space, she muttered. The three, a teenage girl, a boy around her age and a Gungan, all blinked. In unison, taking a step back, the older girl shook her head, sighing a bit. Who are you? None ya business, Sia answered a bit gruffly, which Padme quirked a brow at. Sia then looked to the boy and raised a brow. You work here, right? She asked her fellow kid, who slowly gave a nod. Who says I don't work here either? The girl inquired with a raised brow, and Sia glanced to her. You're too clean, she pointed out, which caught the older girl off guard. The Gungan doesn't look too comfortable around these electronics. She couldn't really blame him. Which only leaves the kid slave-eyed, guess, judging by his age and dirty look. This seemed to annoy the boy as he glared at her. I'm a person and my name is Anakin. I don't care what your name is, Sia huffed as she put a hand on her hips. I need to talk to your boss. I have a rather stupid large order to fill and I'm wasting daylight. Anakin gazed at her and her brow twitched. Today please, she snapped, and the boy yelped before running out back to find Watto. The older girl looked at the younger one and frowned. Don't you think you were being a little mean? Look, lady, I don't have time to be nice, all right, Sia said rather irritably. I'm hot, I stink, I'm dirty, I'm hungry, and I have sand in places that there shouldn't be, Sia whined a bit. So pardon me for my attitude, but I hate this stupid planet. The older girl and the Gungan simply took another step back from her. Plus there is a sandstorm on its way and I would like to be back to my ship before it hits. You have a ship? The brunette questioned and Sia raised a brow, wondering why this girl was trying to get into her business. She didn't sense any ill intent from her, but still. Well, it's not my ship. Just where I'm staying, Sia answered just as she saw Anakin walk back into the shop, flanked by an irate Toydarian and a middle-aged human male. The Toydarian was angrily flapping his wings, he was glaring at the human beside him. And I said no money, no deal. The blue alien stopped and looked over at Sia, who eyed him. He was quite disgusting to look at. And you, what business is so important as to interrupt me when I'm with customers? Sia, who held a neutral expression, doing her best to not let her attitude run wild. Because I actually pay for your services. Going into her back pocket, she pulled out a datapad, handing it to the Toydarian. The winged alien scanned the list. The droid parts 1 have in stock, as well as the hyperdrive. Sia nodded in understanding while the alien paused, glancing to the elderly Jedi who was watching with preceding detached interest. But the rest of these ship upgrades I don't have. However, yeah, he, the Toydarian pointed to the old man who Sia eyed up and down, is in possession of a ship with no hyperdrive. From the model he told me it is, you would be able to scavenge everything you would require, Sia grunted in thought. She really didn't want to deal with more people than she needed. That would take too much time. Well, I will deal with that with them then, she muttered. For now, I want everything you have, and delivered to the location marked on that datapad. Watto nodded, waving her off. Fine girl, but do tell me how you were going to pay. Watto demanded as his wings buzzed irritably. Sia reached into her other back pocket, and withdrew 5 small black objects, causing the Toydarian to gasp. As that, are those 5 flawless crate dragon pearls. I believe they should cover everything, and maybe a bit more for a later date. The Toydarian nodded, then scooped the gems from her hand, before buzzing off into the back. It's been good doing business with you, he called out over his shoulder. Sia then turned her attention to the next target, the old man. You have something I need, and I now have something you need. Sia tilted her head a bit. Qui-Gon looked at the young girl, appraising her. The force seemed to swirl around her, but there was something attached there. It was odd to say the least. But even more odd was the fact that he could see a lightsaber hilt on her hip, but yet he did not recognize her face. It seems we are at an impasse. Yeah, but I don't plan to be for very long. So how about a deal, old man? Sia grinned a bit, the two being watched by Anakin and the girl. Qui-Gon, now amused, crossed his arms while raising a brow. Oh, what kind of deal do you propose? Sia rolled her neck a bit, a tick she picked up from her sensei as she smirked. Well, it's more of a bet than a deal. She watched the Jedi, which she had no doubt this man was. She then looked outside to where her sensei was, working on his pod. The Boonta Eve pod race is coming up rather shortly, she said, looking back towards Qui-Gon. We each pick a participant to win. We bet what we have. My hyperdrive against your ship, on the winner. Interested? She smirked, and Qui-Gon gave a small smile, and thought briefly of the visions the Force had given him of the young slave boy earlier. Accepted. It was a normal Tatooine morning the day of the race. Blindingly, excruciatingly hot, Padme and Qui-Gon walked toward the seating area with the girl trying to spot Anakin, who she found. However, she was trying to figure out this mysterious competitor that Qui-Gon was betting against. She felt it was very unwise or the Jedi to bet the fate of their ship with a little girl. But what did she know, right? Padme figured the competitor would be the only other human, who was in the 5th row. She looked towards the rather vicious-looking podracer, a man standing beside it checking it over. What gave him away was his wild mane of gold that sat on his head. She couldn't really tell what he looked like, but besides his hair, that wasn't anything very special about him. But then again, Anakin is 9 and is expected to win this thing, through fate or something like that. Yo, she heard out of nowhere. Which cow? Said Padme to nearly jump in surprise, and she looked to see the younger girl from the junk shop, standing not too far away from her, giving her a smirk. You're an easy scare, aren't you? The girl teased her, and Padme blushed as she calmed herself down. I am not, she defended, but then frowned. I never caught your name. Because I didn't give it, the girl snorted, but she extended her hand. But my name is Sia, she introduced herself. Now that she had gotten food, rest and a good shower, she was much less irritable than the other day. The girl shook Sia's hand with a small smile. Padme, the older girl introduced herself. Their attention was given to the sound of opening horns, indicating the race was about to begin. Padme glanced to Sia, who held her arms crossed as her pink eyes were focused on a certain blonde. You don't seem worried, Padme spoke up, not afraid your sensei might lost at all. Qui-Gon, who had remained quiet, perked at the question posed by Padme. He too was curious. Not at all. My sensei is a lucky guy, but along with that luck is skill, Sia smirked. He won't lose. Hearing this made Padme feel uneasy, and she glanced to Qui-Gon, who tried to keep the unease off his face as well. Neither of them had time to speak as another horn went off, signaling that the race had just begun. The starting flag fell, and Naruto's pod roared to life. Several other racers screamed, too distracted by the sudden noise to realize that Naruto was already several yards ahead on them and steadily increasing. Sia whistled in appreciation while Padme's jaw actually dropped. Qui-Gon uttered a few of the more colorful examples of alien language he had picked up along his travels, which earned quizzical eyes. He coughed into his hand, looking away, calming himself. Well, it's just the start of the race. Plenty of time for Anakin to catch up. Sia's eyes traveled from her sensei to the pad in her hands to continue watching the race, and she smirked. Sure he does. During the race at several key turns, Naruto would slow down his pod right before gunning the engines and blasting past the other races once more, sometimes leaving them in smoke from the fire blasting from his engines. On the last corner before the final straightaway in the course, a floating camera buzzed in and got a close-up shot of Naruto just before he overtook Sebulba, who was coming up with all kinds of ways to murder the man toying with him. Naruto held a bored expression on his face as he raced, as if he was taking a stroll. Naruto's lead continued for the next 2 laps, until it came down to the last corner once again. Sebulba had pulled ahead and was determined to stay that way. Close behind him was Naruto, who didn't look worried in the least bit. Trailing behind them was Anakin, who finally managed to catch up. The Doug broke out into a cold sweat as he heard that monster of a podracer engine's roar once more. He dared glance to see what was going on in his rearview and saw the podracer gaining on him, as if about to go right through him. Seeing that the yellow-haired human wasn't making any moves of trying to pass by Sebulba, the Doug actually panicked and swerved out of the way with a scream. His right engine ground into the earth, and promptly exploded. The race ended with Naruto coming in first, Anakin second and Gasgano in third. Sia, who had already predicted the outcome, made her way to her sensei, who hopped out of his pod, dusting himself off. You're cruel, sensei. She laughed, with Naruto simply smirking. Oh, whatever do you mean, Jinx? Sia's brow twitched. Then, the two noticed a different mood settle over the others. What's up with them? Naruto questioned, with Sia giving a shrug as an air of dismay hung in the air. It kind of reminded him how he and Sakura would get whenever Sasuke was mentioned. Naruto hummed as he looked over the boy who had come in second. This is the one Sia told him about, being his competitor for the parts he needed. Come on, Jinx. Naruto beckoned her as he headed over to the group. Oh, are we going to gloat and rub it in their faces? Sia hoped with a big grin, but only earned a bop on the head from her sensei. Ow, what was that for, dummy? It's not good to be a sore winner, Jinx, Naruto grumbled at his apprentice, who rubbed her head with huff. Hey, Naruto spoke out, earning the group's attention. Sia crossed her AR. As she took notice how Qui-Gon seemed to study her sensei, while Padme looked awestruck, but she didn't know why. Padme, however, knew exactly why, because while she assumed the blonde was a normal-looking guy, he was everything but. He was incredibly handsome. The way his wild hair blended with his tan, smooth-looking skin, his jaw structure, his full lips, the whisker marks on his cheeks that gave him an adorable look. But what had her was his eyes. She couldn't help but feel lost in those blue pools. Not to mention there was a considerable height difference. Here she is at 5 feet 5 and he had to at least be 6 feet 0, maybe 6 feet 1. High. Padme spoke out first, trying her best not to drool. She might be a queen, but she was still a hormonal teenage girl that was very much into handsome men. This G.U.Y was clearly a few years older than her, probably 19 or so, but the way he carried himself was not that of a boy, but a fully mature man, and that probably attracted herself even more to him. "I'm Padme," she introduced, holding out her hand. Naruto looked upon the girl with a calculative gaze and he gave a charming smile to her. The girl was beautiful, he had to admit. It was clear though she wasn't from this planet. Like Sia had mentioned, he could have sworn though he saw the girl gain hearts for eyes once he smiled at her and shook her hand. "Naruto," the blonde introduced himself before looking to the boy, not even glancing to the Jedi who was still studying him. "Anakin, right?" "Yeah." The boy frowned. He really didn't want to be a sore loser, but he couldn't help it. He wanted to help his new friends out so bad. Not to mention prove his pod was the best and win the credits for his mom. So yeah, he was super bummed out he let everyone down. "You put up a good race, kid, I'm impressed," Naruto praised, which took both Sia and Anakin by surprise. Naruto then looked to the pod. "You built this pod yourself?" Naruto wondered, with Anakin slowly nodding his head. "Even more impressive," the blonde mentioned as he looked over the pod. "Though you didn't win, you should be proud of yourself, Anakin. There aren't many kids your age I know who has such talent, and I'm not talking just about racing." Thanks," Anakin said, actually meaning his words. He was really caught off guard by this guy's praise. He expected him to come over and gloat and rub in how he lost, not this. Naruto then scratched his cheek as he could still feel the fact they were bummed out. "Mind me asking, just what exactly did you guys have on the line?" Again, he wondered, now finally addressing Kigo. And with a curious look, since Anakin was just a child, Padme was too love-struck and SHMI was just as lost as Anakin. Which only left the Jedi, who assumed a thoughtful expression rather than the studying one moments prior. "They bet their ship, which is ours now." Sia grinned, but Naruto bopped her on the head. "Ow, quiet Jinx," Naruto chastised, causing her to huff. He then pieced it together. AJ, Eddie and a girl not from the planet putting their fate with a boy who appears to have talent and looks to be a slave. Not to mention the disappointment that they lost. "You're stranded here, aren't you?" "Yes we are," Ki-gon nodded, folding his arms. "And it's even worse now because, like your young friend said, the ship now belongs to you and we are still without a hyperdrive." Naruto hummed in though, UGHT, as he then glanced to Anakin and his mother. "And let's say Anakin won," Naruto proposed, "what exactly would he be getting besides a few credits?" Naruto questioned as he glanced back to Ki-gon, who stiffened a bit as he then glanced to a curious Anakin and SHMI. "I waged with Watto the boy's freedom," Ki-gon muttered, which surprised SHMI and Anakin. For the pod, he gestured to Anakin's pod. Naruto gazed at him before he looked over Anakin in thought. He then ran a hand through his hair before he spoke. "I'm going to be nice. I'm going to talk to the Toydarian," Naruto stated as he looked to SHMI and Anakin. "Consider yourselves free. Pack your things, you're leaving this dustball. Sia, go with them, guide them to the ship, get them settled in," Naruto told her, surprising her even more. He then looked to Ki-gon. "I'm going to help you, Jedi, simply because you tried to help this boy. If you're stranded, we'll take you where you need to be," Naruto informed before he turned around to leave, heading for Watto. "Sensei, you can't be serious. Where are you going?" "To negotiate." Darth Maul was not one who could be so easily surprised, and in those rare moments that he was, it generally resulted in something becoming dead. So you can only imagine his reaction when he heard a voice behind him, before he even felt a presence. Yo! Twin crimson blades burst to life, and the Zabrok warrior rushed forward to slay who dared sneak up on him. However, before he could even get a good swing in, his legs suddenly gave out and he fell face first into the blazing hot sand, burning his face just a little bit. Maul hissed in pain, but he didn't let out a scream. No, the scream came when his bones felt as if they were breaking and he was forced to sit up, floating in the air. It felt his heart was going to explode while his chest was caving in. His pained yellow eyes tried to focus on his assassin to see it was a man wearing an orange cloak, holding a single hand up in a rather lazy grip. "I knew I felt darkness near," he heard the man chuckle. "Like I said, something is always happening on Tatooine." Maul grit his rotten teeth as he tried to block out the pain or even try to free himself with the Force. But it was no use. "What a piece of crap," Maul heard the man mutter and noticed he was inspecting his lightsaber. It looks so dull and basic. Not made for sand, probably not waterproof either. The man studied the saber. Hopefully you are more skilled enough to actually make this junk work for you. The man then lowered his hand and the pain began to subside for M. Owl, who fell to the ground but still couldn't move. I'm not going to kill you, little Sith, even though I should. Probably save me a headache or two. Maul's pride was now wounded. Was he just spared? Instead you're going to send a message to your master. A snarl of fury etched onto the Sith's face was tell enough to answer that question. An old legend will no longer be just a legend. The one the Sith and the Jedi feared will return and none shall stand in his way. So either back off, or fall from his blade. With that said, Maul once again felt pain course through his body, but it began to travel into one core place, his brain. Once again Maul let out screams of agony and pain before blood trickled from his nose and he fell unconscious in the sand. With his message given, the hooded figure began to leave, dropping the crushed lightsaber. Pitiful. You're finally back. Naruto raised a brow as he approached his ship to see Sia waiting for him on the ramp. It's been several hours since she last saw him and she had started to worry for him, not that she would actually admit it. Where have you been? Oh, I decided to just take a stroll. Naruto shrugged with a chuckle. Came across something interesting. Was amused with what I found. Naruto said a bit cryptically and Sia waited for him to share, but he never did. Have our guests settled in? He wondered with Sia's brow twitching. Yeah, sensei, are you sure about this? I mean, we don't know these people and now we're being a taxi service. She questioned with Naruto giving a small shrug. I don't see nothing wrong with it. Besides, it's not like they are staying with us indefinitely, he told her. We're just giving them a ride to wherever they need to go and head on our way. Which is where again? Coruscant, Naruto answered honestly. There are some parts one need for Cortana. Coruscant is the place that I can think of that may have them. Naruto shared his idea. Plus I felt bad for winning. I mean, they need the ship much more than we needed parts. But they're Jedi. I didn't do it for the Jedi, Sia, Naruto assured her. I did it for me. Trust me, this is going to play out in my favor in the coming time. Naruto chuckled as he rubbed her head while he walked past her. For now, suck it up, and play nice. Sia gave a cute pout as she followed behind her teacher, bringing up the ramp as she did so. Whatever you say, sensei. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Can't sleep. Padme looked away from the table, leaving her thoughts as she looked to see Naruto walking from the cockpit and going into the fridge. She slowly shook her head, as he grabbed a water and offered her one which she refused. Naruto sat down not too far from her and took a sip, Padme throwing subtle glances every now and then. The Q. Yuin is very thankful for your help, Mr. Uzumaki. Once she has the time she will be more than willing to. I don't want a reward, he cut her off gently, which took her by surprise. And please, just call me Naruto. Naruto requested with Padme smiling softly, nodding her head. So I never really grasped onto what is going on. Everyone is so hush-hush, Naruto grumbled as he took another sip of water and Padme sighed a bit. The Trade Federation has put a blockade on our planet, Naboo, she started, earning listening ears. Our people are suffering, dying. The Queen is worried. She must convince the Senate to intervene. Or I'm not sure what will happen, Padme frowned. We don't have the resources to engage in a war, and I would really like to avoid violence, but sometimes it just can't be avoided. Naruto supplied with a knowing look, which made her frown. I find it sweet and noble of you that you wish to speak to the Senate about getting involved while your people are dying, as you say, Naruto chuckled humorlessly. The Senate won't help you, Your Highness, Naruto informed, taking her by surprise. It's filled with selfish bureaucrats who only care about their own profit. If you want something done, you're going to have to do it yourself. But the Senate must help. They have to, or what? What do they lose? Naruto raised a brow which made her frown. A peaceful, beautiful planet that doesn't provide them what they need. Sure, the Trade Federation is a bully. They are picking on a planet weaker than them. But hear what I just said, weaker than them. They aren't a real threat or concern to the Senate. Which means Naboo isn't on its list of priorities, Naruto expressed, and Padme looked away, saddened. As I said, If you want something to be done, you're going to have to handle it yourself. Perhaps the Jedi will help. The Jedi are ruled by the Senate, Naruto answered, which Padme grumbled at. There is only so much they can do as well. They aren't soldiers, they are peacekeepers. From what I understand, the Trade Federation has been on Naboo's ass for months and the Jedi are just now getting involved. Naruto raised a brow. Why is that, do you think? Well, because we felt that we could handle it on our own, and look where it got you, Naruto quipped, positive he had Padme's full attention. Your planet is a part of the Galactic Republic, Your Highness. Which means you have a senator to represent your planet. Your senator knows the powers and limitations of your planet. They knew a war between Naboo and the Trade Federation wouldn't be much of a war, all things considering. Why is it now that the Jedi are just getting involved when they should have been involved in the first place? Padme didn't have an answer for him as Naruto finished sipping his water. Because there is corruption within the Senate. I bet if you started talking money to the Senate, they'd be willing to help you. But you haven't mentioned a single credit to get their attention. They have no dog in this fight. The blonde shook his head. Maybe your senator is at fault, maybe it's the Supreme Chancellor. Someone is to blame for all this, and someone must take responsibility. Who that is up to you, Your Highness. Naruto smiled a bit. But what is important now is that you will go to Coruscant, discover that the Senate won't help you, or by the time they do it'll be too late. And you still have no real way to combat the Trade Federation. He sipped before he remembered. Oh, and the Jedi's hands are tied. The girl bit back a curse as everything the older boy was saying made sense. She did have a feeling that the Senate would deny her aid, which left her with no real option. To save her people, she would have to surrender herself to Nute Gunray, something that made her feel sick. I still have to have hope, Padme whispered, meeting Naruto's gaze. I have to hope that the Senate is not as corrupted as you say and that they will feel what the Viceroy is doing is wrong. You're more than welcome to continue on to Coruscant, Your Highness. Naruto waved her off. However, what are you going to do when you see that I am right? Surrender to that slime Gunray. He raised a brow which she looked disgusted by. I haven't known you very long, but I can sense you're a strong young woman, Padme. I admire that. What do you feel I should do? You want my honest opinion? Yes, I do, Padme told him with a determined look in her eyes. While she believed she needed to have hope, despite what Naruto is saying, she also had to be realistic. She had to be prepared to be told no. She had to have a backup plan, because until now, the Senate's involvement was her only plan. She would ask Qui-Gon his thoughts, but she didn't trust the man's judgment. Not after he had just lost her ship and put the Skywalker's freedom on the line. Sure, she didn't know Naruto very long, but from what she was hearing he is rather intuitive. Hire me, Naruto answered, which caused Padme to do a double take. What was her intelligent response as Naruto simply repeated himself. You want me to hire you, like a mercenary? Something along those lines, yes. Naruto nodded his head with a smile. What I really want is a partnership with Naboo, Naruto expressed, which intrigued her. Naboo isn't the only planet that aligns itself with the Republic that is seen as small and weak. Irrelevant, Naruto shared, causing her to tilt her head. In fact, there are many more planets similar to Naboo within the Republic that outnumber the more powerful planets. Some that don't even have senators to represent them. Naruto shook his head in thought. The Senate is filled with corruption, greedy politicians who are only worried about filling their pockets and furthering their own goals. I want to flush them all out. You do. How are you going to do that? By partnering myself with planets like Naboo, helping them develop a strong voice to be heard, Naruto answered truthfully. As much as I don't like politics, and I really don't like politics, I know how to play the game. Numbers and money equal power. He weighed in his hands, Padme paying close attention. Money gets people's attention, and for the right amount, they'll do anything for it. Numbers keeps people in check and allows decisions to be made. Padme couldn't help but agree with him. You go to the Senate. Tell them you wish for their aid. 3 planets agree to help you, 10 decide to stay out of it. Majority wins. Naboo is stuck. Naruto gave an example. But what if the numbers were switched? 10 planets who are just as small as Naboo agree to help, 3 who are bigger than these planets individually, still don't match up to the collective. Naboo gets the help it needs. So you want a partnership with Naboo to put an end to the corruption within the Senate? Padme inquired, making sure she had this right, which Naruto nodded to. How many planets have you partnered with already? You will be the first. I just got back from a long trip, so I haven't started yet. Naruto chuckled a bit sheepishly. But if you agree, I will be Naboo's shield and sword as long as I have its backing with important matters such as this, Naruto required, which Padme thought over. You don't need to give me an answer now, Your Highness. But I feel it would be in your planet's best interest if you make a decision soon. Naruto then stood up as he moved to go to his resting chambers. Naruto, she called softly, getting his ear. How did you know I was the queen? Not even the Jedi were able to figure it out. Naruto said nothing at first as he held back an insult towards the Jedi. Instead, he gave another answer that was just as true in his opinion. None of them have the same fire as you do. He shared, which caused her to blink. He then gave a shrug with a light smirk, plus you're way prettier than they are. With that said, he went on to his chambers. Good night, Your Highness. Padme, please. Just Padme. Padme requested a bit shyly. It felt strange hearing him refer to her as such, just like it was probably strange for him to be called Mr. Not to mention, she enjoyed the way he spoke her name. How it rolled off his delectable-looking lips. Her warm brown eyes saw Naruto pause, giving her one last glance, along with that smile that made her heart throb. Good night, Padme. I got a question. What is it now? Sia sighed at her fellow kid who she sat not too far from in thought. Anakin then pointed to her lightsaber and he raised a brow. You have a lightsaber, so does that mean you're a Jedi too? Anakin wondered curiously just as Obi-Wan was passing through. Sia gave a snort before she laughed, which made Anakin feel a bit self-conscious. What's so funny? The fact that you think I'm a Jedi, she laughed, which Obi-Wan couldn't help but frown in thought. No, I'm not a Jedi. Never will be, don't want to be. Me, I'm a shinobi in training. She thumbed to herself with a grin which piqued Anakin's interest while Obi-Wan was curious. A shinobi? What's that? A complete badass, Sia boasted as she held a smirk. Shinobi are so much cooler and way more powerful than Jedi. They use whatever they can get their hands on, and they don't have to follow stupid rules like the Jedi, Sia mocked as she raised her nose high in the air. Anakin frowned as he decided to argue with the girl. That's not true, because no one can defeat a Jedi. And if shinobi are so much cooler than Jedi, how come I've never heard of them? Anakin popped her bubble, which amused Obi-Wan a bit as Sia frowned in thought. Because dummy shinobi have to stick to the shadows. If everyone knew what shinobi looked like, they wouldn't take them seriously. Sia returned with a glare. Plus, who the hell told you Jedi can't be defeated? I've never heard a story of a Jedi being beaten. Funny, I've heard plenty. Sia sneered, which only irritated Anakin more. Face it, kid, Jedi aren't all that. Being a shinobi, that's where all the perks are at. You get to go on important missions, have secret identities, and do cool stuff, plus you get paid and able to do whatever you want. Sia listed with Anakin snorting in his own mocking way. Sounds like a regular OL bounty hunter to me. Sia's brow twitched at the comparison while Anakin crossed his arms. Well, whatever. Believe what you want to believe, but I'm going to become a Jedi, the best there is too. Just watch me, then you'll have to respect the Jedi. Anakin boasted, though Sia looked like she wanted to spit. The day I respect a Jedi, is the day one beats me in battle, Sia glared with Anakin smirking. Then your time is coming, huh? Is that a challenge, brat? Sia snarled as she stood up and Anakin stood up with her. Glaring at her, maybe it is. What are you scared? I'll show you scared, you twerp. Sia growled as she reached for her saber, but before she could do so, she was bonked on the head. Ow, sensei. What the hell? Sia turned on her master with an annoyed pout. You're getting a little too carried away for a friendly discussion, Sia. Naruto gave her a look which made her frown a bit. What did I say about playing nice? He asked, and Sia gave a small huff. Now, apologize to Anakin for insulting his beliefs. But why the hell do I need to apologize? He started it. No, I didn't. You did. You're crazy. You're a liar. Hey, Naruto snapped, causing both children to shut up and sit down. Obi-Wan flinched from the small flare of power Naruto released. I don't care who started it. I said apologize. Naruto looked to his student who looked away, crossing her arms. "Sia," he called, and she looked at him before turning to Anakin. "I'm sorry for insulting your beliefs." She rolled her eyes. Naruto didn't say anything for a moment, deciding to no longer force the issue. "Go to your room and meditate," he commanded. Sia didn't argue this time around as she stood up and left rather quickly. Once she was gone, Naruto sighed as he ran a hand through his hair. "That girl is so stubborn," he complained a bit before turning to Anakin. "I apologize for Sia's rather colorful opinion. I've been trying to teach her to be mindful of others. It's not going so well at the moment." He chuckled a bit sheepishly, with Obi-Wan deciding to ask his own question that had him curious. "Well, a few really. She seems to have a thing against Jedi. Has she had a bad experience with one?" Obi-Wan questioned before he added, "If you don't mind me asking." Naruto hummed as he went to his fridge to grab some fruit. "I won't go into details, but yeah, she has," Naruto confirmed, and Obi-Wan was rather curious. "It doesn't help that I'm not a big fan of Jedi myself, but I'm no the girl's father, so I'm not going to force her to feel however just because I want her to." He shook his head, taking a bite. "But like I said, I do apologize for her rudeness. That is something I am trying to work on." "Why is she so mean anyway?" Anakin wondered with a frown. "All I did was ask if she was a Jedi and she bit my head off." Naruto winced a bit as he scratched the back of his head. "That's why. You asked if she was a Jedi. A common mistake considering she wields a lightsaber, but she isn't," Naruto denied, piquing the two's interest. "As to why she's so mean, well, you just have to get to know her. Honestly, she's a very sweet girl." Naruto smiled softly. "She's just rough around the edges is all. She's had a very harsh upbringing and she's from Nar Shaddaa," Naruto threw in, glancing to Obi-Wan, who now understood. "Nar Shaddaa isn't a good place in the least bit, even worse than Tatooine. Just be a little patient with her if you can, Anakin. I'm sure in time you two will become good friends." The older blonde grinned. "I wouldn't mind," Anakin admitted as he tapped his cheek a bit. "But she doesn't seem like she wants to be friends with a Jedi." Hearing this caused a brow to raise from Naruto. "You want to be a Jedi?" "Yeah, and I'm going to be the best there is," Anakin vowed, with Naruto giving a hearty laugh. Anakin, however, didn't feel offended with Naruto's laugh like he did with Sia. It didn't feel as if he was mocking him. But he did wonder what was so funny. "What's so funny?" "Nothing, kid." Naruto ended his chuckles with a grin. "You just remind me of someone I once knew is all. If you want to become a Jedi, go for it. I'm sure with hard work, dedication and actual effort, you'll become a great Jedi. Who knows, maybe you'll get Sia to stop hating Jedi so much." Naruto shrugged before he held out his fist for Anakin to bump, taking the boy a bit by surprise by the gesture. "Just whatever you do, do your best, Anakin." Anakin gazed at the fist bef. Or he gave a grin and bumped fists with him. "Yeah," with a grin matching the young boy's. Naruto then nodded. "Now if you'll excuse me, I have to go check in on my apprentice. We'll be reaching Coruscant in about 20 minutes. Naruto looked to Obi-Wan. "Help yourself to some food in the fridge, just don't touch my orange juice," Naruto warned with a dangerous smile before he left down the hallway. Obi-Wan watched the man leave, not able to be curious about him, to the point it was kind of nerve-wracking. This man was a concentration in the Force, something he has never felt before, but yet it was as if he wasn't there at all. But Obi-Wan was able to figure out that the feeling of twilight he felt a few days ago was coming from this Naruto. There was a feeling of darkness, but not to the point where he felt he was in a dark or evil presence. There was no sense of foreboding or anything of the like. And from what he could tell, the guy seemed to be a normal guy. Rather caring, if he had to put a word to it. After all, it was only because of his kindness that he and his master weren't still stuck on Tatooine. Plus the way he spoke encouragingly to Anakin was another factor he took into account. All in all, the man was very interesting to say the least, and a part of his natural curiosity wanted to learn more about him. But he held back, as his master continued to teach the living Force. "Knock knock. Go away." "Can't, my ship." Sia's brow twitched at her sensei's smart-ass response, but she didn't halt her meditation. She did feel him step more into her room, the door closing behind him. After a few minutes or so, she finally opened her eyes to gaze at him in question, wondering what he wanted. You come to scold me some more. I came to see what is on your mind, Nar. Yuto responded as he had crossed his arms. It's not like you to snap like that, especially by a kid. Sia's frown remained as she looked away while Naruto sat beside her on her bed. Talk to me, Sia, Naruto requested quietly. It's just us. Sia took a deep breath, taking her walls down because she could sense it was just her and her sensei, the only person she truly admired and cared about. I don't know why I got so angry, Sia admitted, looking at the ground. It didn't start out like that. I just found it funny that Anakin thought I was a Jedi, and I told him about me being a shinobi instead, Sia explained. Her sensei just listening, but then he said something that irritated me more than I thought it would. He started talking about how shinobi weren't as great as Jedi because he has never heard of them. And then that Padawan seemed to agree from the look on his face, and I just... Sia, Naruto calmed, placing a hand on her leg. I find it great and flattering that you think shinobi are much better than Jedi. And I agree with you. But you do realize that I am the only shinobi around, right? Naruto reminded, causing Sia to frown as she turned her head away. I know that, and I guess that's why I got angry, Sia huffed. Anakin started to badmouth you and I wanted him to shut up. Sia growled as she then looked to her sensei. You can't expect me to just sit there and stand for that, can you, sensei? I mean, I don't expect you to do anything, Sia, Naruto corrected, and she listened carefully. You are entitled to feel how you want to feel. I'm not going to get in the way of that or tell you otherwise. Naruto explained warmly. But there is a time and a place to express how you feel. You also need to pick your battles. Sia slowly nodded in understanding. I may be the only shinobi around right now. But that's what I'm training you for, right? Naruto smirked and Sia perked up a bit. And once I feel you are ready, you'll take on your own apprentice and so on and so forth. Yes, sensei. Sia smiled softly. Naruto simply gave the girl a hug, which she happily accepted, snuggling into his warmth and closing her eyes to hear his steady heartbeat, which put her feelings to rest. I'm sorry I disappointed you, she whispered quietly, but Naruto shook his head. You didn't disappoint me, sweetheart, he assured. You've just shown me that I have lots to teach you, Naruto chuckled as he gave her a good squeeze, which she enjoyed. After several more moments of embracing each other, Naruto released her and rubbed her head affectionately, earning a small giggle. Now come on, I believe you've had enough of time out, Naruto teased, causing her brow to twitch in slight annoyance, but she said nothing. As they got up to leave, a question popped into her head. Sensei, we are just dropping these people off and moving on with our lives, aren't we? Sia wondered. She really didn't want to deal with the Jedi any longer than she had to. Plus she wasn't used to all these people wandering around her home. It put her on constant alert, which made it hard for her to relax. Naruto glanced to her before he gave an honest shrug. Maybe. I believe we will be hanging around the Naboo for a little longer, he said, which caught her attention. I've set a deal in motion with their queen, hopefully she'll go through with it. So like I said, maybe, he answered, but didn't really answer Sia's true question. And the Jedi? Don't really know. Tisk, figures. You want me to accompany you? Yes, Queen Amidala said in her usual stoic tone, as she gazed at Naruto, who stood before her and her entourage. The Jedi were also present, and they were just as confused as everyone else, besides Naruto, of course. None of them were under the impression Naruto and the Queen were even on speaking terms, let alone the Queen asking for this mysterious man for aid. Padme has told me of your insight regarding the Senate, Amidala brought up, which made everyone even more curious. While I haven't made my decision, I still would like you to be my side as guidance. It was silent for several long moments before Naruto gave a shrug. Okay. He wasn't exactly prepared to accompany the Queen, but he did tell Sia it was a possibility. He now, however, would have to give her something to do instead of waiting around for him. He figured he could send her on a supply run again, but that would require her flying his ship since Cortana was out of commission and he wasn't exactly ready to put his baby in the hands of his cute little apprentice. He could have a clone go instead, that just sounded like too much trouble in his opinion. But it was better than having her sit around doing nothing and hear her complain about it later, not to mention he'd been without his AI for too long. So with that thought alone, He made his decision. We'll be landing in 10, he advised them all before he left the room to find his apprentice waiting out in the hall. If you're going to eavesdrop, at least have the decency to hide like a real shinobi, Naruto poked, which made Sia blush in embarrassment. I'll keep that in mind, she mumbled before getting to the task at hand. We're going with them, she questioned, and Naruto shook his head. No, just me. You will be going with a clone and Miss Skywalker to get some supplies, Naruto informed, and Sia raised a brow, probably asking about Shmi's company. Well, she is kind of my responsibility right now, since I freed her, and she can't stay with Anakin at the temple, Naruto reasoned. She has nowhere to go, so I'm going to help her, Naruto said as he walked on, causing Sia to sigh. Plus we need to get you some stuff too, he informed, which honestly took her by surprise. Me? Yeah, Naruto confirmed, giving her a curious look. We're in Republic space now, more legit options to choose from. Plus you're not a Jedi, you don't need to wear the same threads all the time. Datbeo. Naruto grinned and Sia blushed a bit at the poke, but she poked back. But you do, sensei. Meh, they're comfortable. Sensei, why can't I fly again? Because you're too short, but I'm tall enough to see. Not in my opinion, Naruto muttered as he stood outside the ship walking beside the queen. Not too far away was Shmi talking with Anakin, probably giving him a pep talk. I got to go, Naruto told his apprentice as he saw Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan bow to Senator Palpatine and Supreme Chancellor Valorum. Jar Jar bowed as well, as Naruto and Padme walked through, the latter simply nodding to the two. It is a great gift to see you alive, Your Majesty. Palpatine smiled as he bowed his head. With the communication breakdown, we've been very concerned. I'm anxious to hear your report on the situation, Palpatine stated as Naruto studied him silently. May I present Supreme Chancellor Valorum, he gestured with a small smile. The other man bowed his head with a small smile as well. Welcome, Your Highness, it's an honor to finally meet you in person. The man greeted. Naruto, however, had to fight back the frown he wanted to give as the man's tone sounded very dry. He hated politicians. Thank you, Supreme Chancellor, Padme responded with a dry tone of her own. They began walking and Naruto gave a glance to Sia, who gave a small wave as she and Shmi left with his clone, and Naruto gave her a wink. I must relay to you how distressed everyone is over the current situation, Valorum stated. I've called for a special session of Senate to hear your position, he informed, and Padme hummed with a small nod. I'm grateful for your concern, Chancellor. There is a question of procedure, Palpatine stated as Valorum stood back while Padme and Naruto walked with Palpatine. But I'm confident we can overcome it. Quote, I must speak with the Jedi Council immediately, Qui-Gon told the Chancellor before looking to the boy. The situation has become much more complicated, he muttered. He turned back to Valorum with a small sigh. Much more complicated. There is no civility, only politics. Naruto gave a bored frown as he sat beside Padme, who had changed her wardrobe once again. They've been sitting here for almost a good hour or so, simply going over what has been happening. And right at this moment, Naruto did not like Palpatine. He thought the man was slimy. Something about him in the Force seemed off, but what was more important? He couldn't get a good read on his emotions. At first, he thought he was losing his mind or something, and decided to use his empathy sensor abilities on others. Padme felt annoyed. The handmaidens felt annoyed and worried. Panaka felt annoyed. Then there was Palpatine, just about nothing. What he did get, however, was very hard to distinguish. It was as if the guy had s own kind of emotion scrambler on him or something. Was that even possible? The Republic is not what it once was, Palpatine stated as he paced around. The Senate is filled with greedy, squabbling delegates, he continued. There is no interest in the common good. I must be frank, Your Majesty, there is little chance the Senate will act on the invasion, he admitted, and Naruto could feel Padme's annoyance rise, but he gave her a nudge and she took a deep breath. Chancellor Valorum seems to think there is hope, Padme responded in her queen voice, trying to keep a little edge to it as possible. If I may say, Your Majesty, the Chancellor has little real power. Palpatine sighed softly and Padme's frown increased as she glanced at Naruto, who was still studying Palpatine. He is mired by baseless accusations of corruption, he added. The bureaucrats are in charge now. This caused Padme to narrow her eyes as she clenched her fist a bit. This already isn't going well. So what options have we then? Our best choice would be to push for an election, Palpatine said with a suggestive shrug. Of a stronger Supreme Chancellor. One who has power over the bureaucrats, and can give us justice. Naruto literally bit down on his tongue to stop from talking, as he knew his place. But he smelled bullshit and lots of it. You could call a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum. But he has been our strongest supporter. Padme exclaimed, and Palpatine gave a small frown as he continued to pace. Our only other choice would be to submit a plea to the courts. The courts take even longer to decide than the Senate. Padme argued. Our people are dying, Senator. We must do something quickly to stop the Federation, she urged, and Palpatine had a frown on his face. To be realistic, Your Majesty. I think we're going to have to accept Federation control for the time being, Palpatine concluded, and Padme frowned deeply before looking towards Naruto with a worried look, and he gave her a knowing look. With a sigh, Padme gave him a slight nod as she then gave Palpatine a straight glare. That is something I will not do. The chair recognizes the senator from the sovereign system of Naboo. Padme took a calming breath as Naruto surprisingly held her hand, caressing the back of her hand with his thumb. She sent him a thankful look, and he simply smiled at her as their disc seat floated down to be closer as Palpatine stood. Supreme Chancellor, delegates of the Senate, a tragedy has occurred, the senator began, which started right here with the taxation of trade routes and has now engulfed our entire planet in the oppression of the Trade Federation. This is outrageous. I object to the senator's statements. A Nemodian stated as he rose and floated not too far from theirs, as he represented the Trade Federation. However, Chancellor Valorum glared towards the senator and shook his head. The chair does not recognize the senator of the Trade Federation at this time, Valorum responded, putting him back in place. To state our allegations, I present Queen Amidala, recently elected ruler of Naboo, Palpatine introduced with a light bow of his head. Padme took a deep breath as she stood and walked forward as Naruto sat back, watching her go to work with a small smile. With his empathy manipulation abilities, he gave her the confidence she needed to speak strongly, and let her know in the back of her mind that he had her back. Honorable representatives of the Republic, Padme began, her queen voice strong and loud so she could be heard. I come to you under the gravest of circumstances. The Naboo system has been invaded by the droid armies of the Trade. I object. There is no proof. The Trade Federation senator cut her off, which annoyed her and Naruto. This is incredible. We recommend a commission be sent to Naboo to ascertain the truth. The Congress of Malastair concurs with the honorable delegate from the Trade Federation, the senator of Malastair added in. Naruto remained silent, though he could feel Padme's rising anger and did his best to try and calm her down with his powers. A commission must be appointed. Enter the bureaucrat, he heard Palpatine whisper in Padme's ear. The true rulers of the Republic, and on the payroll of the Trade Federation I might add, Palpatine stated, causing Naruto to narrow his eyes, but he couldn't help but agree. He sensed lots of greed and smugness in this hall. This is where Chancellor Valorum's strength disappears. The point is conceded, Valorum sighed, looking rather tired. Will you defer your motion to allow a commission to explore the validity of your accusations? He asked, but Padme gave a light growl. I will not defer. I come before you to resolve the attack on our sovereignty now. I was not elected to watch my people die and suffer, while you discuss this invasion in a committee. The queen snapped before taking a deep breath to calm herself while Naruto rose and walked over to her. She glanced to him and he whispered into her ear. I don't like Palpatine's game, but it's obvious you will not get what you desire from this Senate. Naruto pointed out softly. Call for no confidence. We'll handle this ourselves, he told her so that only she could hear. Padme gave him a look to see if he was sure and he nodded. I'm sure. He squeezed her shoulder before sitting. G back down, earning a raised brow from Palpatine, but he ignored him. Padme frowned thoughtfully before turning her head to the Chancellor with a glare. If this body is not capable of action, I suggest new leadership is needed. She started, which surprised Palpatine a bit as he looked between the Queen then to Naruto, who remained silent and focused. I move for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum's leadership. As soon as that was said, Padme turned away as the Senate began shouting, some in protest, others in agreement. Valorum looked almost devastated as he sat down while people in the Senate began to shout out, "Vote now! Vote now!" And even though order was called, it was not heard. Palpatine smiled as he turned to Padme, who had a frown on her face. Now they will elect a new chancellor, a strong chancellor. One who will not let our tragedy continue, Palpatine said, a bit too smugly in Naruto's, but Padme practically ignored him. The man then felt as if he was being watched. Shedden turned his head a bit to see that Naruto was giving him a strong observing glare. The blonde gave a small smirk as he mouthed out, "I'm watching you, Senator. Yusa thinking Yusa people gonna die. I don't know." "Well, they're not," Padme heard as Naruto walked into the room without his robe. He walked over to her, standing beside her as she looked at the window. Jar Jar bowed his head to Naruto, who nodded to him. "Have you made your decision?" Naruto brought up and she nodded. "I have. If you are able to successfully aid Naboo, I will be more than happy to form a partnership with you." Naruto smiled as he bowed his head. "I humbly thank you for the opportunity to prove myself, Your Highness." Naruto winked at her, and Padme was glad she has makeup on her face to cover her blush. "My ship is on its way back for us to depart immediately." "Your Highness," Panaka called as he and Palpatine walked in with excited smiles. Padme separated a bit from Naruto but stayed close. As the two stopped, "Your Highness, Senator Palpatine has been nominated to succeed Valorum as Supreme Chancellor," Panaka revealed happily. Padme could sense Naruto's subtle displeasure at this and would ask him about it later. Instead, she could only stare as Palpatine bowed. A surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. He smiled with a chuckle. Padme simply turned away to gaze out the window once more. "Your Majesty, if I am elected, I promise to put an end to corruption." "Who else has been nominated?" she asked, and Palpatine answered without hesitance. "Bail Antilles of Alderaan and Ainley team of Malastair." This caused Naruto to snort as he shook his head with a small smirk. "I feel confident our situation will create a strong sympathy vote for us," Palpatine idealized. "I will be Chancellor. I fear that by the time you have control of the bureaucrats, Senator, there will be nothing left of our people, our way of life." Padme turned to him slightly with a light scowl. "I understand your concern, Your Majesty. But unfortunately the Trade Federation has possession of our planet," Palpatine reminded. Naruto gave him a glance as he heard the slight smugness in his voice. It irked him, even more. He couldn't read his emotions in the Force or with his abilities. But it didn't matter. After watching the man for a couple of hours and feeling him out, he had a very strong idea of who this man was. Playing this game would be amusing. "Senator, this is your arena," Padme spoke with a tone of finality. "I will return to mine." She then turned back with a sure look. "I've decided to go back to Naboo." "Go back. But Your Majesty, be realistic. They'll force you to sign the treaty," Palpatine reminded, sounding shaky. Padme gave a small smirk as she shook her head as she looked at her new partner. "No, they won't. Not as long as Naruto is assisting me," she told him, causing Palpatine and Panaka to look back towards Naruto, who wagged his brows at them. "I had figured that this could be resolved peacefully with the Senate's help. But I no longer have the time nor the patience to waste any longer on politics. Naruto will protect me and he will be my secret weapon, won't you?" "Of course, Your Highness." Naruto smirked to Palpatine, who looked a bit alarmed. "No treaty will be signed. Well, it will, in Newt Gunray's blood, that is." Naruto shrugged before turning to Padme. "My queen, we should go. I have word the ship is ready." He gestured for her to lead and she nodded and began to walk off, Panaka and the handmaidens following after. "Your Majesty, please, stay here where it's safe," he pleaded before he turned to Naruto. "Please, you are her bodyguard, isn't it your job to keep her protected? She is safe here, not there." Palpatine tried and Naruto gave a small smirk as he eyed him. "Trust me, Senator, the safest place she will ever be, is by my side." Chapter 3. As soon as we land, the Federation will arrest you and force you to sign the treaty. Naruto remained quiet for the time being as Panaka spoke. He was currently meeting with the Jedi and the Queen. Sia was still learning how to pilot, considering she wouldn't stop pestering him and she didn't want to be around the Jedi. "I agree. I'm not sure what you plan to accomplish by this." Qui-Gon spoke his thoughts. "We can't fight a war for you," though he looked towards Naruto as he spoke with a sure tone of voice. Then there was no point in the council of sending you, the blonde said in a dull tone. He honestly looked bored with it all. There is no intention to sign a treaty of any kind, Naruto shook his head. The plan is kill Newt Gunray, free Naboo, simple, Naruto shrugged. Sure we have no army, but I'm enough. This caused Panaka to raise a brow, gazing at him with incredulous eyes. You are enough. How so? Panaka questioned, garnering Naruto's attention. This is an entire army of droids. This is not a smart move. Your Highness, are we sure we can trust this guy? Panaka looked to his queen, who held her usual bland expression, but she didn't respond to Panaka, only looking to Naruto, who remained silent with his arms crossed. I am curious as to how you believe you are enough. Just know that I will get the job done. How I do it doesn't really matter, Naruto said as if he gave an uncaring shrug. Unlike the Jedi, I'm not limited. Droids don't scare me, and neither does Gunray, Naruto smirked a bit, catching Ki-Gon's attention from the dark look in his eye. Whether you trust in me or not, is your choice. Queen Amidala, he then looked around the room before he turned to leave. If you need me, I'll be setting course for Naboo. With that said, he left for the cockpit to find Sia learning the controls from a clone. Sia noticed her sensei's mood and she turned a bit. Are we really fighting this war, sensei? She asked softly, earning his attention. Naruto's blue eyes glanced to her as he plotted course for Naboo. I mean, do you think I'm ready? If I didn't, you would be with Anakin. Wouldn't you? Naruto chuckled softly, causing Sia to huff lightly. Much to Sia's joy and Anakin's dismay, SHMI didn't let Anakin tag along for this war, a special. When Naruto made no promises of watching over him, and the Jedi didn't want to be held responsible exactly either. I'm not worried about you, Jinx. I'm sure you'll make it out alive to finish your training. And if I don't, then it sucks, cause I'm going to have find another apprentice. Sensei, you idiot. Why are we doing this again? It was the Jedi's idea. Tisk. Figures, Sia grumbled. She and her sensei waited by a tree not too far from the Jedi, who were also waiting like them. Not long after the course had been set, Naruto had been told that the idea of getting the Gungans to help during the war was Qui-Gon's. Honestly, he didn't want to be bothered with getting outside help, but it wasn't his planet, and Padme trusted more in earning the aid of the Gungans than him taking the Federation's army by his lonesome. Which was fine, he understood her doubts. He would just have to show all of them a fraction of the power he possessed. Which was fine and dandy with him. He liked showing off. Always has. Always will. His attention was given to the voice of Jar Jar, who emerged from the water. Dear's nobody, dear. The Gungan city is deserted. The Federation, Qui-Gon muttered to himself in thought. They probably got to them while we were away. He then gave a small sigh, stroking his beard. Do you have any idea where they could be, Jar Jar? When in trouble, Gungans go to sacred place, Jar Jar answered. Mesa show you. Come on. Mesa show you. Jar Jar grinned as he ran off. The others followed after him. It didn't take long for Jar Jar to lead them to the sacred place, and just like Naruto suspected, they were present. Upon being seen, they were led further into the Gungan camp. Naruto stayed beside Padme. After a few moments they came to a stop. Your Honor. Queen Amidala of Naboo, the Gungan introduced. The group walked forward, the Jar Jar taking the lead and the decoy queen right behind him. However, Padme and Naruto were right behind her. Heyo Dadi B Boss Nass, Your Honor. Jar Jar greeted nervously with a bow. Jar Jar Binks, Rugor Nass called with a tone of annoyance before looking at the group behind the Gungan. Who's da USSN Uthers? He wondered as he pointed. The decoy spoke up with the customary queen voice. I am Queen Amidala of Naboo, I come before you in peace. Ah, Naboo Biggin, Nass muttered. Yusa Bridgen da Machaniques, Yusa al Bombad, he declared. The decoy spoke in return, as the Gungans looked between the two. We have searched you out because we wish to form an alliance, the decoy stated, but didn't say any more as Padme spoke up and moved forward, Naruto right behind her, just in case any of these aliens got any bright ideas. Your Honor, Padme greeted, surprising those who followed her besides Naruto. Nass raised a brow as he looked confused, and questioning Padme's identity as he gestured towards her. I am Queen Amidala, Padme stated, which surprised Jar Jar. This is my decoy, the rest are my protection, Padme introduced herself. Still using her queen voice. I apologize for my deception, but it was necessary to protect myself. Although we do not always agree, Your Honor, our two great societies have always lived in peace. Nass simply hummed as Padme continued, the Trade Federation has destroyed all that we've worked so hard to build, she frowned. If we do not act quickly, all could be lost forever. I ask you to help us, no I beg you to help us, Padme stated as she got on her knees. We are your humble servants, our fate is in your hands, Padme continued as the rest of the others got on their knees. Except for Naruto and Sia, who held bored expressions still. I don't beg, Naruto voiced quietly with Sia nodding in agreement. Me neither, even though this normally would have come off as disrespectful. Due to the silence, Nass, laughed. Yusa no Tinkin Yusa greater den Gungans. Padme frowned while the shinobi raised a brow. Mesa like dis, maybe Wessa bine friends. Nass accepted with a smile before blubbering. Padme gave a relieved smile as she then looked to Naruto who wagged a finger. Whip, they're here, they're here. Great, Naruto smirked as he leaned against a speeder. Standing beside Padme, within moments more speeders pulled up to them, revealing Panaka and few other soldiers. Okay Pancake, what's the deal? Panaka ignored Naruto's nickname and looked to Padme. Almost everyone's in camps. A few hundred police and guards have made an underground resistance, he reported. I brought back as many of the leaders as I could, he said as Nass walked up to them. The Federation army is also much larger than we thought, and stronger. They are washing machines with guns, they don't even know how to aim right, Naruto quipped with Sia nodding in agreement. I'll lead the front lines. Naruto clued them in, which no one decided to argue with since he seemed so adamant on the matter. We don't need to win the battle, Padme interjected. But Naruto didn't seem to pay no attention. It's a diversion. The Gungans will draw the droid army away from the city. R2, she called for the droid who beeped before revealing a hologram of the city. We can enter the city using the secret passages on the waterfall side, the queen plotted. Once we get to the main entrance, Captain Panaka will create a diversion. Then we can enter the palace and cut the viceroy's head clean off. Sia added excitedly as she started bouncing. I volunteer for that job. Please pick me, please. Naruto could only chuckle at his apprentice while everyone looked at her as if she was crazy. We're not killing anyone if we don't have to, Sia, Padme responded to the younger girl, earning a groan. We need him alive. Ugh, how boring. But if it makes you feel better, Jinx. If he tries anything, then you can maim him a bit, her sensei offered, rubbing her head. Sia simply huffed. It was better than nothing she guessed. Ki-gon could only stare at the two ninja, wondering how they could be so bloodthirsty. The difficulty would be getting into the throne room. You shouldn't have a problem once you get inside. But there is a possibility with this diversion. Many Gungans will be killed, Ki-gon threw in, looking to Nass who proudly stated they were ready to do their part. Naruto didn't say anything, but he had it handled regardless. We have a plan that should immobilize the droid army, Padme continued with the plan. We will send out what pilots we have to knock out the droid control ship, orbiting the planet, Padme then gave a soft sigh. But still we face great risk, the weapons on our fighters may not penetrate shields. And there is still a bigger danger, Obi-Wan added. If the Viceroy escapes, Your Highness, he will return with another droid army. Which is why we chop his head off. I still volunteer. Please pick me. Which is why we must not fail to get the Viceroy. Padme shook her head, giving Naruto a glance making him groan again. Everything depends on it, Sensei. Quote, Naruto responded to his apprentice over the comm link as he stood at the very front of the lines, the Gungans behind him readying for war. The cape of his robe billowed in the wind, giving him a rather cool look as he gazed at the oncoming droid army. He raised his hand up, a signal for the Gungans to raise up their shields, which they did. If I did something reckless, would you be mad? Depends. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say like a 7. Don't die and we'll be fine. Okie dokie. Hit it, R2. Naruto could only chuckle at his student. While the tanks approached then halted, behind them the army of droids. The blonde didn't flinch in the slightest as the tanks fired and fired at the shields for several long moments. It was as if they were testing the strength of the force field, before making their next move. Their blasts did 0 damage, and eventually, they gave up. They then began to deploy the droids, who were ready and armed themselves, marching toward the Gungan army. He could feel the Gungan army getting anxious as the droids approached, but he raised his hand to quiet them. No blood would be spilled under his watch. As he said, he was going to take care of this. As the droids approached, Naruto flexed his fingers and he raised his hands, before he clapped them together and interlaced his fingers. Moments later the ground began to rumble quietly, then out of nowhere pillars of wooden roots broke free from the planet and began to destroy the confused droids with relative ease. Naruto formed another hand sign and several pillars began to wind and twist together, morphing into 3 large wooden dragons that gave out loud roars before attacking. The Gungans were absolutely speechless, taking in everything that was going before their very eyes. But even still, with all this destruction going on, more droids just kept coming and coming and coming. However, Naruto wasn't fazed. In fact, he welcomed them. It's been a while since he's used such powerful ninjutsu at once, and he was hoping to give his powers enough room to be free, although he didn't want to destroy or permanently scar the planet. With a single hand sign, several clones appeared, all of them spread out evenly. Raising their hands up, each of them formed a element-specific Rasenshuriken. Not enough, my ass. Are you going to come at me, Jedi? No, but I will. Darth Maul frowned at the familiar voice, as did Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, who were preparing to fight the Dark Jedi they were sure was a Sith. Qui-Gon's would have wished that he knew that a Sith was involved, because then he could have reported it to the council. But no, he had a feeling this was more to it than a blockade. Eyes traveled to the opening blast doors to see Naruto. Uzumaki walking to the scene, a small smirk on his lips. Naruto. Obi-Wan blinked, surprised to see the blonde. Aren't you supposed to be on the front lines? Obi-Wan questioned just as the blonde passed by him and his master. I was finished up there. Sensed this pup and decided to be a bully. Naruto chuckled as he could sense the fear that was coming off of the Sith unconsciously. The way his eyes widened, his stance tensed, his grip on his saber tightened. Fear. How delightful. Now, if you'll excuse me. Naruto shrugged off his cloak, then reaching for his lightsaber. I have a puppy to play with. He then glanced back to the 2 Jedi. Feel free to watch though. I'm sure the council would love to hear about how a non-Jedi took down a Sith that is not supposed to exist. Naruto mocked the 2. Are you really that arrogant to believe you can handle him by yourself? Qui-Gon demanded, earning a laugh from Naruto. It's not arrogance, Jedi, it's confidence. And yes, I'm pretty sure. Just watch me. Naruto activated his golden saber with its signature snap hiss, its beauty being admired by the 3. Before we begin, you deliver my message. My master has no reason to fear you. Jedi. Maul spat, which made Naruto pout a bit. Ah, you shouldn't insult me like that. Naruto whined a bit before a deadly smirk appeared upon his lips. But Maul was more concerned about the man's sapphire eyes bleeding crimson. It makes me want to kill you. Naruto blurred out of sight, as he appeared at Maul's side, who called upon the Force to guide him. He managed to block Naruto's strike, but his blade was quickly parried, but he managed to block the next strike and the next before moving in with his own strike. It honestly felt as if he was fighting 2 people right now. Which was strange considering he hadn't even used that cloning technique. Maul ducked under Naruto's kick and moved to slash at the man, but he managed to hop over him, and slam blades with him multiple times. Pushing him back, the Sith scowled and began to overpower Naruto with his strikes, which were quite strong and meant to be overpowering. They weren't, it only made Naruto more elite on his feet as he deflected the strikes, moving them away. The blonde picked up his speed and his grip and began to make wide strong swings towards Maul, which surprised him. As a result to his wide strong and fast swings, Maul had to make tight sharp blocks. Gaining the sense he was about to be overpowered, he flipped back and tried force pushing Naruto away. And it would have worked if Naruto hadn't been fast enough to avoid it. Maul quickly made a block, but it was sloppy and it nearly resulted in him getting his hand chopped off. Naruto pushed against Maul, who of course pushed back. The 2 didn't let up. But Naruto managed to overpower him, pushing him back. Maul scowled and caused a tile to bash against a door panel, which opened the door behind him. Naruto smirked as he knew he was backing Maul into a corner. So he continued to do so. His fast aggressive strikes were appalling to Maul, as he sensed that part of Naruto's ability to fight was fueled by the familiar forces of the dark side. He was pretty sure Jedi didn't use the dark side to fuel themselves, but then again he was dealing with a former Sith Lord. The Sith scowled once more as Naruto was getting a bit too close for comfort. He had nearly lobbed off his arm. "You're slipping. Better focus, little Sith," the blonde advised as he kept toying with the Sith who growled at him. Maul flipped back, landing North A bridge as they had entered another room. Naruto didn't even give him any time to focus as he met blades with Maul who barely managed to block. He continued pushing until he managed to sweep Maul off his feet with a kick, then as he fell moved to slash off his head. By the skin of his rotten teeth, Maul was able to avoid the slash, but as a result, he fell off the bridge landing on the lower level. Naruto hummed before he followed after and met Maul with a strike, before landing on the ground skidding to a halt. The two lunged at each other again, throwing stabs and lashes at each other. Naruto deflected and parried, while Maul dodged and blocked. Naruto had to commend the Sith, as he was pretty skilled using the double-bladed saber, but so far he was only impressed his blocking skills. He knew he was overwhelming the Zabrok, constantly pushing him back, getting more ground than he was. Unlike Maul who had a nervous scowl on his face, Naruto had a smile on his, enjoying toying with the Sith. He spotted at least 10 spots that Maul left open which he could exploit, and it would lead to his eventual death, but it had been a while Naruto had fought another lightsaber user to the death. He wanted to milk it as much as he could. The blonde gave a chuckle as he parried Maul's strike, managing to overpower him. This was starting to becoming boring, and just as he was about to exploit one of those openings, a red deflector shield came in between them. The blonde blinked and glanced to Maul, who looked just as surprised and even tested it. Once they both realized that the shield couldn't be bypassed, Naruto deactivated his saber. He then pressed the mini-tech in his ear. "Jinx, how are things going?" he asked, and what he got in return was the sound of blaster fire along with explosions. "I'm having a blast," Sia responded merrily. "Whoa. Look out, R2. Sia yelled out before firing another shot. "What about you, sensei?" Quote, nothing to really mention," Naruto shrugged as he glanced from the astonished Jedi to Maul, who narrowed his eyes at him. "If the little Sith here doesn't step up his game, he's going to be a dead little Sith," Naruto chuckled, which infuriated Maul. "Sounds great, sensei. I got to go." About to hit the bullseye. Then Sia cut the connection, earning a soft chortle from the man. But his attention was given to Maul, who had begun pacing around, glaring at him with intense rage. "You gonna say something, or are you just going to glare at me? How about when I'm done running you through with my saber, I'm going to find that little bitch of yours and torment her, forcing her to watch as I kill everyone around her. Then I'm going to kill her," Maul declared with a mad grin. Naruto didn't look impressed before he sighed, shaking his head, and to Maul's surprise, a second hilt appeared in Naruto's other hand. 2 sabers, Maul thought to himself. Naruto hummed patiently before he gave a small smirk as the field disappeared. Maul gave a grimace. He was suddenly pushed back from Naruto's assault. The blonde swung his 2 gold sabers with wild-like precision, making Maul work even harder to make sure he didn't get hit by either. The two entered a circular room, stepping around as the two focused, one with a grin and one with a frown. "What was that about running me through with your saber?" Naruto questioned as he spun around, hitting him with one, then spun around again to hit him with the other. Maul grimaced as he realized he wasn't even getting the chance to strike, as he was too busy trying not to get struck. However, it was quite taxing. Naruto's form was aggressive, wild, precise, fast, and hard-hitting. Each time they clashed blades, Maul felt his entire body vibrate a bit. And before he even realized it, as he spun his saber around for another block, Naruto used one saber as an uppercut, managing to cut the saber in half. Surprised by this attack, this allowed Naruto to grin as he attached his 2 blades together to form a double saber. And with a wide horizontal wave, he bisected Maul, who grunted in pain as a red mist surrounded him, his blood. Maul's eye twitched as Naruto gave him a wink, then blew out a small breath of air, which pushed him down into the chasm, his body separating as it fell. Bye-bye little Sith, Naruto muttered as he deactivated his sabers and sealed it away. He then hummed as he looked for a way out, but found none. Other than the shields, he hummed as they shut off, and with a blur, he was at the end. Dusting himself off, he began walking towards the two Jedi when he heard a voice go off in his ear. Naruto. He heard Padme call, and he hummed in response. He could feel her joy and relief and could only imagine how big and bright her smile was as she said, "We won." Quote, he gained a smile of his own as he twirled his finger. Yip, now Viceroy, I think it's time you go to the Senate and explain all this. I think you can kiss your trade franchise goodbye, C.S. Murked as she stood beside Padme and her sensei. Get this alien shit stain out of my face, Sia ordered, and Panaka rolled his eyes at Sia's exuberance and did as told as he led Gunray and his entourage away. Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon following just as Palpatine and some Jedi Masters walked off the ship. Always wanted to say that, Sia giggled, earning an affectionate head rub from her sensei. Palpatine thanked the two Jedi who bowed, and the man walked over to Padme and Naruto with a smile. We are indebted to you as well for your bravery, Naruto Uzumaki, and your young apprentice, Palpatine smiled. D at the girl who did her best to hide her disgust. I'll be keeping an eye out for the shinobi's services. This earned a raised brow from Naruto just as Palpatine turned to Padme. Congratulations on your election, Chancellor. Padme greeted the man with a small smile as he bowed his head. The man took a good look at her before giving a bigger smile. Your boldness saved our people, Your Majesty, he stated, and she gave a glance to Naruto who rolled his eyes and she stifled a giggle. It's you who should be congratulated. Together, we shall bring peace and prosperity to the Republic, he smiled. Padme gave a nod in response before Naruto gave a mutter that only Padme could hear, which made her smile lightly and fight the urge to give him a hard nudge to his ribs. Once Palpatine finished what he had to say with her, he moved on and she turned to Naruto and Sia. I thank you both very much for helping my planet in its time of need. Padme honestly thanked them with a beautiful smile that even had Sia blush a bit in embarrassment, while Naruto gave a small smile. You two really helped much more than I thought anyone ever would. Even the Jedi weren't as much as help as you were. Padme smiled, looking to Naruto directly. If we hadn't run into Sia, she then looked to the girl, I'm not sure what would have happened. You would have been shit out of luck, that's what, Sia huffed, as she crossed her arms with a knowing look. Besides that, I'm not sure you ever apologized to my sensei about doubting his skills, she brought up, causing Padme to glance to Naruto, who simply held a raised brow as he gazed at his student. I mean, you went through all that trouble to get the Gungans, but they didn't do a damn thing from what I hear. Yet my sensei did exactly what he told you he was going to do. Kick droid ass. You're right, Sia. Padme sighed softly, honestly taking the girl by surprise because she figured someone would stop her by now. I did doubt your sensei and I never did apologize. She then looked to Naruto with a true apologetic frown. I really do apologize, Naruto. I should have trusted your word all the way through and not just in parts. It's no big deal, Your Highness. Naruto waved her off, causing her frown to deepen slightly. I understand why you chose out to seek out the Gungans. You were thinking about the well-being of your people, and putting your trust in an army rather than one man. I would have done the same thing, a long time ago, Naruto smiled softly. But I accept your apology. Yeah, now you know. Sia threw in with a smirk, earning a bonk on the head from Naruto. Ow, what was that for? Don't overdo it, Gaki, Naruto grumbled, earning a few curses under her breath. Padme couldn't help but openly giggle from the actions of the two. Even though neither of them were Jedi, it is apparent they are master and apprentice, and the two are very close with each other. Thank you, Naruto, Padme smiled softly. But I still feel the need to make it up to you. I already plan to go through with our deal completely, since you did hold up your end of the bargain, Padme mentioned with Naruto nodding. But surely there is something else I can do, she wondered, raising a delicate brow. Naruto cupped his chin with a hum, as he gave it some thought, while Sia looked at her sensei, wondering what he could want from the queen. Padme also watched him anxiously as he even closed his eyes, pondering in thought. After several moments he raised 3 fingers. First, you allow me to purchase a home here on Naboo, Naruto told her, which Padme smiled at, nodding her head. I'll have a home built for you, She was easily willing to do such a task, considering what this man has done for her when he didn't have to. Sia wondered why her master wanted a house on this planet. Sure, it was quite beautiful, but home-worthy at this point in time. She wasn't so sure. Second, you allow me to purchase the astromech droid, R2-D2. He's the first competent astromech I've come across in a really long time, not to mention he and Sia seem to get along great together. Naruto requested, looking to his apprentice. Wouldn't you agree, Jinx? Wait, R2. Oh hell yeah. Sia jumped excitedly, which was enough to confirm Naruto's thoughts and convince Padme, who smiled happily at Sia's enthusiasm. How about as a gift, from one friend to another? He offered, which sounded just fine to Naruto, while Sia couldn't help but cheer as she ran off to go find her droid friend and tell him the good news. The two watched her run off and Padme's smile softened as she looked to Naruto to see he had a fond look in his eye. Both of these requests I'm happy to fulfill, but may I ask why? Well, Naruto sighed a bit as he ran a hand through his hair. I really don't need a house. I haven't had one in years. Sia has never had a real home, Naruto revealed, causing Padme to look surprised. She's lived on the streets since the day she was born till I found her. Even Anakin, who was a slave, his life was better than hers before I found her, Naruto whispered. I promised that I would give her a home, a place she could call home. The house isn't for me, but for her. Naruto turned to look at Padme, showing her how serious he is. And as for the droid, she needs a friend to talk to at times, plus it's so she can stop pestering me, Naruto muttered, earning another laugh. Okay, I understand. You really care for her, huh? Padme poked a bit, with Naruto nodding his head as he watched his apprentice grin and laugh as she spoke with R2. Yeah, I do, he said softly before shaking his head, then turning to Padme. Now for my third wish, he chuckled, while Padme playfully rolled her eyes. I want a date, he said simply, catching Padme off guard. Excuse me, I missed that. I want a date with you. Hearing this, Padme's eyes got big and her heart began to skip. With me? Naruto just nodded his head. Yes, a romantic one. Just you and me, having dinner. Enjoying each other's company, Naruto explained a bit more. Padme blushed under her makeup and she couldn't meet Naruto's eyes for several moments. Yeah, I can grant that, she said a bit shyly. I would love to actually, she admitted, and to make her feel more at ease, Naruto gave a sigh of relief. Oh really? Good. For a second there, I thought you would say no. He laughed sheepishly, but Padme blushed a bit more. And no, I want to. When do you want this date? Padme wondered while Naruto gave it some thought, tapping his chin before he shrugged. I don't know, sometime soon. In the near future, he offered, crossing his arms. Since you're a queen and not just a handmaiden, it's going to take some time to your kingdom back in the swing of things. Once everything dies down, then we can have our date. Naruto smiled genuinely as he then pulled out a small pad, handing it to her. On here is my holochat information if you ever need to get a hold of me for business or something. Also on there is my personal holochat information. Feel free to call me if you ever want to talk, Padme, he winked, causing her blush to return as she accepted it. And if his wink wasn't bold enough, he got even bolder as he leaned in and kissed her on her cheek. You look beautiful, by the way, he whispered before turning to walk off. See ya, let's get going. Hearing this, Padme blinked, taking a step forward. Wait, you're not staying? She questioned, hoping he would. Naruto paused in his step as he looked back to her. Naboo is throwing a celebration for victory and new friendship tomorrow. Surely you are attending. Padme tried to stress, but Naruto gave a soft shake of his head with a smile. I'm not really into celebrations, and we have places to go, people to see. Naruto denied while Sia looked curious. But thank you for the invitation, milady. Naruto respectfully bowed his head, surprising his apprentice while Padme somehow felt flattered. She had a feeling he didn't do that a lot. We'll see each other soon though. With one last wink, he turned and began to walk off, Sia and R2 following after him. Padme watched with slightly sad eyes. She still felt joy in her heart while gripping the datapad. She really hoped so. Sensei, what are you talking about? Celebrations means free food, Sia tried convince her teacher as they walked through the crowd, headed to the ship. We never get free food. As tempting as free food as Jinx, it's not important, Naruto told her calmly. While this adventure was fruitful, it still wasn't a par. Of my plans and now I'm even further behind, he sighed softly, confusing Sia. She had no idea what he was talking about. But if you wish to stay, you're more than welcome to, he offered her with a glance, but she shook her head. I'm good. Thought so. Naruto chuckled, but he stopped with a small frown, and it was quite sudden to the point Sia kind of bumped into him. Before she could ask what the big idea was, she caught sight of just why he stopped. Before them was a tall dark-skinned man who looked rather intimidating, and beside him was a green alien that sat on a floating chair. While her force training wasn't complete, it wasn't hard to figure out that these two were really powerful with the force, and from their attire, she could only assume they were Jedi. Just great. Master Mace Windu, Master Yoda. Her sensei greeted a bit tense. A pleasure it is to see you again, former Knight Uzumaki. Yoda spoke up and Sia's eyes widened a bit as she looked to her sensei. Former. Her sensei was a Jedi. Still young as I remember, you are. Yet older with maturity. Can't be a kid forever, I guess, Naruto muttered dryly. Master Yoda, this is my apprentice, Sia. Sia, this is Grand Master Yoda of the Jedi Order. Naruto introduced politely with Sia giving a slight nod. Yoda gave a ghost of a smile, while Mace eyed the girl who only returned his gaze with a glare. While it was nice seeing you again, Master, was there something you needed? My student and I are on rather tight schedule. We just wanted to get your opinion on the dark Jedi you faced, Mace spoke up, his gaze returning to Naruto. Who raised his brow slightly. Master Jin mentioned that you referred to him as Little Sith. Because he was. How do you figure? He wasn't an adept with the dark side. He was steeped in it. Not to mention he bore the ancient tattoos of the Sith, Naruto answered honestly, which piqued Yoda's curiosity. I did combat with him, and he had the fighting prowess of a Sith. However, I don't believe he was the mastermind. Are you implying there is more than one? Mace questioned, looking perplexed. Of course, Naruto confirmed. Ever since the era of Darth Bane, there's always been two Sith. The rule of two, the master to embody power, and the apprentice to crave it. Naruto reminded the Jedi Master. Though he had lots of rage and anger, he did not have the refinement that a Sith Master would have. So he was the apprentice and the master is still out there somewhere. Naruto then gave a small smirk. So if I were you, I'd watch your backs. He then gave a slight bow. It was pleasant coming across you, Master Windu, Master Yoda. If you'll excuse us. With that said, Naruto pushed along, Sia hot on his heels as Ardu caught up. Knight Uzumaki, he heard from Yoda, causing him to stop. He turned his head slightly to gaze at Yoda, who gave him a small smile. Warms my heart it does, to see you healthy. Naruto's expression didn't change as Yoda went on. Stop by the temple, you must catch up. We should. Welcome. You and your apprentice always are. Naruto didn't move for several moments, but he gave a nod, and a twitch of a smile. I'll keep that in mind. Turning once more, he pressed on. The two Jedi Masters watched the two leave, disappearing into the crowd. Within moments, Yoda gave a soft sigh while Mace crossed his arms. I couldn't sense any darkness from him, but the girl, clouded within the Force, both of them are. Their roles in this plot, yet to unfold. Yoda shook his head slowly. Mace could only try and relax, but the look in at girl's eye, intrigued and frightened him all at the same time. There was a certain level of anger there that he's never seen within a child. He didn't sense any anxiety, or fear, just hate. But yet, with such hate, she wasn't wrapped around by the dark side. Mindful of the shinobi, we will be. Chapter 4. Chapter 4. Systems Online. Ellipsis. 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 You got a new hyperdrive, I see. Naruto gave a SMA. LL smirk as a rather detailed holographic image of a beautiful woman appeared on his hologram projector. The blonde gave a shrug as he smiled softly at her. The old one was starting to leak, he responded before he raises a brow. How are you feeling, Cortana? He questioned, leaning back in his seat. Cortana gave out a stretch as she smiled at him. I'm feeling rather refreshed. Haven't felt like this since I was created, thank you. Naruto nodded his head as she tapped her chin. Though I can't really say I wasn't hoping for. I'm working on it, love. Naruto cut her off gently. It's not as. Why trying to figure out how to transfer data and all that junk into actual flesh? Naruto sighed, running a hand through his hair. Even I have my limits, and as time goes on they only get worse. Cortana gazed at him almost worriedly. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Don't worry about it. He waved her off, but she wasn't convinced. I made you a promise, and I plan on keeping it. I plan on keeping all my promises, he said, more to himself as he looked out towards the window to see nothing but trees. Cortana just studied him, knowing he was swimming in guilt. How long have I been out? What's changed? She wondered, sitting down, and Naruto hummed to himself. He was probably thinking how long it has been. He does often lose track of time. 10 years maybe. Nothing has changed much, he shrugged as he continued to think it over. Been doing a bit of recon, keeping eyes open and whatnot, Naruto said with Cortana frowning. They're growing. Quite fast actually. He then stroked his chin in thought. Republic is still standing. Just elected a new chancellor who I'm pretty sure is a Sith Lord, Naruto threw in, causing her brow to raise. Oh, a Sith Lord is Supreme Chancellor. How did that get past the Jedi Council? My guess is they're too busy being puppets to sense it, he felt, earning a chuckle. I don't know, nor do I really care. But what I do know is that Palpatine is going to be a piece in this game. When his use has ran out, I'll dispose of him. Cortana smiled, hearing the tone of finality in his voice. Oh, and I took on an apprentice. Did you now? Cortana wondered, sounding genuinely surprised. That is unexpected. Figured you'd wait a bit longer. Naruto just closed his eyes as he smiled. That was the plan. But the Force called me to her, Naruto said, as if nothing else need to be said. She tried to rob me. Naruto laughed while Cortana couldn't help but find amusement in his words. But she's a good kid. She has that drive that I'm looking for. But, at the same time she can be a little hard-headed and annoying, he grumbled while Cortana smirked at him. But that's what attracts them to you, otherwise they'd be boring, and we both know how much you detest boring, Cortana snickered. The blonde scratching his cheek in thought, he had nothing to say. She was right. He didn't like boring at all, and it's only gotten worse as time has gone on. Yeah, he enjoyed to relax and be at peace, but not for too long. His being hungered for battle, excitement, a challenge, even if he was cursing to the heavens all the while. He is just trying to learn not to bring so much strife into his life because of his desire for a challenge. It is no longer fun when a loved one is lost because of his desire for challenges. Which is why he left for 10 years. You said 10 years, Cortana spoke up, her nod being an answer. Have you moved it? She asked with a raised brow. Naruto shook his head as he leaned back in his chair. I haven't had the chance to. Us decided to head home, which brought me to the outer rim where I found Sion Nar Shaddaa, he explained as he then looked out the window gazing at the trees. You think it's time to be moved? Yeah, just in case. Naruto remained silent as he gave it some thought. Where would we move it to? I don't know, but I'll figure it out once we have it, Cortana told him as she was in thought. But for now I need a data update. Naruto gave a nod, but he gave her a light look of knowing. We'll get you a full update once we get home, he assured, which she understood, considering the circumstances. For now you should get yourself reacquainted with the ship. Naruto smirked and Cortana hummed. That was a good idea. However, they were on a time crunch. That's fine, but that can take a day or two. Can we really spare that right now? Naruto stood as he gave a shrug. Not really, but what's more important to me is your well-being. I know how you are when you don't feel like you're in control, Naruto gave her a look and she pouted a bit. Besides, if it's gone and we hunt it down. If it's there, then it's there and everything is fine. Cortana gave a slow nod, understanding his point. So get to work. Oh, and I'm sending in someone you can show the ropes to. What do you mean? Cortana questioned, raising a brow. Naruto smirked at her but didn't answer as he left. Naruto, what the hell do you mean? She barked at him, but was completely ignored. Naruto chuckled lowly to himself as he headed down the hall and came across a new addition to the party. R2, Naruto called, getting the droid's attention. Head to the cockpit. There is something in there that you should meet and I want you to get acquainted with, Naruto ordered, and the droid gave a whir of beeps and whistles. No, she isn't an idiot like 3P0. Naruto laughed while R2 gave a few more beeps. I'm pretty sure you guys will get along. She's going to help you get familiar with the ship. R2 gave another whistle before he rode off to the cockpit. Interesting droid. Naruto smiled as he continued on his way and came to Sia's door, which wasn't closed all the way. Looking inside, Naruto could see she was meditating. Her eyes were closed as she held a rather blank expression on her face, her arms crossed. Hey Jinx, Naruto called out, entering the room. But Sia didn't answer him, still within in her meditation. Naruto slightly raised a brow. Jinx. There was still no answer and he couldn't help but frown as he waited for a response. He knows she heard him, he knows she can sense him, he knows she knows. But yet, here she was ignoring him once again, something she's been doing the last several days since they left Naboo. Not only was her ignoring him turning into a thing, but even the flow of their conversation and banter that he usually enjoyed with her had become short and tart. He could feel an underlying layer of irritation coming from her, but he couldn't figure out why. No, correction, he couldn't be bothered to figure out why. He was so in tune with the Force he could get Sia to speak to him and tell him what's going on with her, without her even knowing he made her. The fact, she is just starting to get a handle of the Force and as a child didn't make it any better for her. But he didn't have the patience nor the care to do too much. She was upset with him about something, that much was clear. But he wasn't going to force her to tell him. He knew from experience, that with children, forcing them to do something they weren't ready for or didn't want to do only gave him a headache. So when Sia is ready to talk, he will be ready to listen. However, while he may not have the patience to figure out what's wrong, he did have the patience, however, to deal with her how he normally did and wait her out. He knows that Sia is naturally impatient, he was the same way once upon a time. And the only way to defeat an impatient person was to be patient. That's how Kakashi and Jiraiya both dealt with him. Finally, Sia's pink eyes opened and she gave him a look as if asking what he wanted. We're having lightsaber training, he told her. Sia rolled her tongue in her mouth as she glanced away from him with a mutter that wasn't exactly quiet. I don't feel like it today. That's too bad. Naruto shrugged as he made a hand sign and there was a light gust of wind that blew. But most importantly sweeping up Naruto and Sia. The next moment Sia knew was splash. Hee. Oops. What the fuck? Sia screamed enraged as she burst from the river, soaking wet. If it was possible, Naruto though he saw some steam coming off of her from how hot she was. Naruto just stood there completely dry while she cursed him out in several languages that he was sure she picked up off the streets. Huts, Rodian, oh was that Mandalorian, stupid Grabird Hotesh idiot, she finished with a huff, trying to dry herself off with the use of the Force, but it was proving a bit difficult. Naruto watched her, his brow raised as he took in her insults, able to feel the bite behind them that usually isn't there. How interesting. All right, you done? He asked and she simply huffed at him with a glare, slicking back her hair. Good. Here, Naruto said as he tossed her what looked to be a saber. She caught it, then looked over it with a small frown. This isn't my saber. No, it's one I just built you for training specifically. Naruto explained to her and she was curious as to what the difference was. Meaning when you get hit, you won't lose an arm, it will just hurt enough to motivate you not to get hit, but keep going. Sia held the training saber then looked to him. You mean if I get hit? If you want to set yourself up for disappointment, sure, why not? Naruto chuckled and she simply glared before activating the saber which was blue. Naruto eyed her, then he pulled out his own training saber, a brilliant red coming to life. We're going to go through all the forms first, then start to blend them. Understand? Quote, yeah, good. Naruto then took Sia by surprise as he was upon her in just a moment, and brought his saber down on her. Just barely she managed to make an overhead block, but the strength and weight of his attack made her knees buckle. Naruto then quickly surprised her by using his free hand to push her with the Force, sending her back into the water. Naru, too waited as Sia came back sputtering as she gave out more curses, her pink eyes wishing death upon him. No fair. You didn't say anything about using the Force. She complained, but Naruto gave a smirk along with an uncaring shrug. No, I didn't. But I don't have to. I'm a shinobi. What's fair when you're in a battle to the death? Naruto raised a brow with Sia closing her mouth, just glaring at him. As a shinobi, you use anything to stay alive and gain victory if it's in your moral compass. While I might use my own arm to deflect your attacks, someone else might use an innocent child, Naruto rugged while Sia looked disturbed by that. It's happened. Not all shinobi are the same. I knew one shinobi who fatally stabbed through his partner to kill his enemy, claiming she was of no use to him if she got captured. Nothing personal. Naruto chuckled while Sia was quite astonished. What a guy. Naruto laughed, shaking his head. Looking to Sia, he gave her his usual somewhat serious look when he was giving a lesson. My point is, Sia, in the life of shinobi there is not such thing as fair or honor. You do what you need to win and stay alive, and you assume your enemy is going to do the same. So you prepare for any and everything, and if you aren't prepared, you adjust or you die. That's simple, understand? Naruto stressed, and Sia took a deep breath as her eyes focused. Yes, sensei. Good. Now let's try again. Again. I can't. Well, that doesn't matter, because we're not finished yet, Naruto said as he stood before an exhausted Sia who lied on the floor. His training saber continued to hum while he also held hers. Considering he disarmed her, Sia had minor burn marks all over her body, showing the amount of times she had been hit, while Naruto was perfectly fine. They've been training for hours to the point where it was completely dark, only the crimson light from training saber being a source of light. Get up, Sia, Naruto commanded, and Sia growled as she stood up with a pained grunt and glared at him. Enough already. I'm done, okay? I don't want to do this anymore. Sia yelled at him with Naruto simply listening. We've been doing the same thing for hours and hours. I'm tired. I'm hungry and I just want to take a shower and relax. Sia finished as she huffed and puffed, glaring at Naruto who held a blank expression. He then took a deep breath, closing his eyes, and Sia figured he was trying to maintain his patience before giving her another command. But to her surprise, he opened his eyes and gazed at her. All right, fine. He then turned around and walked off. Sia blinked as she watched him. That was it. That's it, she called out, but he didn't answer her, going back to the ship. Sia frowned, not sure how to take this, but she didn't question it any longer. In pain, she followed after him, going to the ship. Once she was in, she expected some kind of sneak attack, or maybe a lecture, but she received nothing, just silence. She didn't even know where he went. Figuring the coast was clear, she began to do what she had been wanting to do. Relax. And relax she did, for way too long. She had expected Naruto to inform her it was time to train the next morning, but he didn't. In fact, she slept in, which was odd because he never let her sleep in. When she had finally woke up and realized she overslept, she went to go find him and ask why he didn't wake her up. But he wasn't even on the ship. She tried asking R2, but he was too busy with something else. She then went to go look for him, but didn't find him. She couldn't even sense him. So she just went back to her relaxing. But her relaxing turned into boredom, and she waited for Naruto to tell her it was time for training. But she didn't see him for the entire day. The next morning she woke up at the usual time and waited for him so they could train. But she waited and waited and waited and waited and waited some more, but there was no sign of Naruto. She checked his room, but he wasn't there. She checked the cockpit, nothing. She checked his workstation, zero. She tried searching for him, but couldn't find him. It made her wonder if he had even come back from wherever he went. So she was stuck once again to her own devices, which brought back her boredom because she had not a real idea of what she was doing. So she just meditated until she fell asleep. What woke her up was the sound of the ship's engine turning on, and the rather quiet yet soothing hum of the ship. Curious, she stood up and began to explore, heading to the cockpit where she found an occupied seat. Sensei, Sia questioned, catching his attention. But he didn't look to her as he flipped on switches. Hey, was his dry greeting before he spoke. Cortana, set the coordinates. R2, while she's doing that, ready the shields please. Naruto commanded while he made sure everything was all right. Wait, we're leaving. Yeah, what about my training? What about it? Naruto shrugged as he glanced to her. You wanted to relax, remember? He reminded, and her eyes widened slightly. Hope you enjoyed it. Now sit down somewhere, we're taking off in 5, he warned. Sia sat down somewhere, though she was curious and couldn't help voice her question to her sensei. Where are we going now? There is a temple that I need to visit, Naruto answered simply, which piqued her interest, though she held a frown on her face. So that's where we are going. Sia's frown didn't disappear as she realized that he didn't say anything more about it. Honestly, it kind of ticked her off even more because here she was, once again out of the loop. Well, why are we going there? We should be able to get there in 3 days or so, Cortana spoke up, appearing on the projector for Sia to see. She was surprised to see the beautiful AI while Naruto simply gave a nod. From the corner of her eye she saw Sia and turned to greet her. Hi. You must be Sia, I've heard quite a lot about you. Yeah, likewise, Sia said a bit dryly, though she glanced to her sensei. If Cortana is fixed, doesn't that mean we can seriously start my training now? That's what was holding us up in the first place. Remember? Sia reminded, and Naruto gave a nod. Yeah, and I tried. But you wanted to relax, so now you can. Naruto told her, and Sia's eyes widened, confusion starting to form. Wait. What do you mean? You don't want to train, right? Just relax. Well, now you can. Naruto shrugs, not even looking to her. Your training is being placed on hold until I feel you are ready and more mature enough to focus, Naruto revealed, and Sia's eyes got even bigger. As she stood up from the chair, Cortana looked somewhat surprised by this, looking between the two while Sia tried to argue. It's not up for discussion, Sia. If you want training, find it from someone else. But I'm not continuing your training, because you're not ready. You're serious. Sia yelled out in clear defiance, but Naruto didn't budge, simply going back to the controls. Naruto, she called, fear settling in her heart, and she took a step forward, about to spill out her heart, but she was too prideful. She couldn't bring herself to apologize or admit she was wrong, because she wasn't. It's his fault. He's just being overdramatic. All she wanted to do was rest, and now he's going too far. Fine, she screamed out, a harsh glare on her features. I don't want your dumb training anyway. With that she ran out the room, leaving Cortana and Naruto. Wow, Cortana whispered as she looked to Naruto, who didn't seem bothered in the least bit. I swear, the attitude in teenagers is getting younger and younger, she commented, earning a soft chuckle from Naruto. Yeah, I guess so. Doesn't look like the planet's changed much. Naruto didn't voice a response as he made adjustments to the ship. It's been nearly 4 days since they set out for this nameless planet. And in the 4 days Naruto has done nothing but meditate, pilot, and catch up with Cortana. He hasn't seen Sia once. Not that he really cared. He even got along well with R2, seeing that he really was different from other astromechs, which was a good thing. Even Cortana agreed. Then I still have to tread carefully, he muttered, which Cortana nodded in agreement. Are you sure you don't want coordinates or anything? Wouldn't do me any good, Naruto answered honestly, unless the device you have in mind is made out of some good tech. The signal is just going to get jammed anyway, the blonde shrugged as he grabbed his cloak. The Force will guide me, Naruto assured as he headed out the cockpit. It always has. Keep the engine running. I want to leave as soon as I can, Naruto grumbled while Cortana waved him off. This isn't my first time, Whiskers, she reminded him with a dry look. I know the routine. Just hurry up, will you? This place still gives me the creeps, she said, looking out the window to the hazy jungle. Naruto gave a nod as he walked out. Be safe. She threw in. Naruto gave a light grunt in response as he grabbed a gas mask on his way out, but before he did he was somewhat surprised to see Sia standing beside the exit ramp. He looked her up and down to see that she was dressed. You're coming. I didn't get dressed for my health, Sia returned quietly. Naruto gave her a look before he gave a gesture with his head. Grab a mask, he ordered, and she did so while he opened the ramp. Sia adjusted her mask and they walked out together, being greeted to a rather thick fog that had a yellow tint in color. Still thick as hell, Naruto complained to himself as he started walking. Stay close to me. Sia said nothing as she simply followed along, the ramp closing behind them. Upon getting her footing on the ground, Sia grimaced a bit. It wasn't exactly firm, uneven, moist probably. As the two walked, the young girl looked around to see nothing but hazy vegetation. For whatever reason, she could see that the jungle had an overall scary-like vibe to it. Nothing looked innocent, or peaceful. It just felt as if someone or something was going to jump out at her and attack. She doesn't try to reach out with the force, having a feeling that it would just make her uncomfortable. Well, more uncomfortable. Looking to Naruto, she sees that he is easily moving ahead, which prompts her to walk fast in order to fall in step with him. Neither of them speak to each other, though Sia does her best not to trail too far behind. In fact, she is less than a foot away from Naruto while also keeping her head on a swivel. She has never seen such a dense, thick, dark forest before. Well, then again, being in Naboo was her first time seeing actual healthy vegetation. But she is pretty sure these plants aren't supposed to look like this. "Why are we here again?" she suddenly asks, her voice slightly muffled through her mask. Naruto doesn't answer her immediately as he walks leisurely, obviously knowing where he is going. "You said we were looking for a temple." "That's right." "Okay. Why?" "There is an artifact of great importance there, and it needs to be moved," Naruto says in a matter-of-fact tone, just as he stops. Sia stops as well to see they are surrounded by large bushes, which she finds strange considering that they just came from an open path, but now there is none. Before Sia can voice her concerns, her master waves his hand and she watches as a path is opened due to the plants in front of them dying immediately. Whoa, what did you do?" "I took away its life force," Naruto says as he pushes on, stepping over the dead plants. "It's an advanced technique, but it is only as strong as the user's will." Sia gazes at his back as she listens to his explanation. "It's not a technique I recommend," he mutters a little. Sia hums as she looks back towards the plants that he just killed, only to see the path they made vanish. "Forward, Sia. It's not safe to look back." Right." Sia nods as she turns forward nervously only to see that he is a few feet ahead. "Hey, wait up." Quickly she catches up, now beside him. "So this artifact, what is it?" Sia looks to him to see if he is going to answer, and to her surprise he does, though his tone tells her he isn't exactly thrilled to be talking about it. "It's a stone, a powerful stone that is an inconsistency in the Force," the man says with a small scowl. "It can cause mass destruction if not used properly. So for that reason I move it every so often so its location isn't locked on." "Because there are lots of people looking for this stone," Sia hums. That makes sense, but it only breeds more questions. She wonders, what is the stone exactly? What does it do exactly? Who are these people who want it? But for now she is more concerned with, well, why are you guarding it? "Just because I don't want it doesn't mean I want other people to have it." Naruto doesn't say much else about it, but Sia is still on the subject. "What the hell does this thing do? Why so many questions?" Naruto decided to ask, even giving her a curious glance. "This is the most you've talked in the last week." Sia doesn't respond to him, as she just looks ahead. Naruto waits for her to respond but she never does, so he hums quietly. "The stone bends reality. However, it requires ambition, a strong will. If not, the power will consume them and they will turn to dust." Sia whistles in response, pretty impressed that something like such exists. "How did you come across it?" "It's part of the reason why my planet was destroyed." Sia pauses in her step upon hearing this, though Naruto continues on. AF. Roan mars her face as she feels a bit guilty, but then she begins to catch up with him. As she nears him, a shiver runs down her spine while she feels a pair of eyes stalking her. Turning her head, "Shish." Eve flinches when she sees something jump from the shadows to pounce on her with a roar. Out of reflex she braces for pain, but it never comes. Opening her eyes she sees the strange 6-foot monstrous sea Reacher crushed into a ball then tossed by an unknown force. Blinking, she turns to see Naruto waiting for her patiently. "Keep up." Right." Sia agrees as she follows him, though the two continue on in silence for several more minutes. This time around Sia is on high alert while making sure she stays close beside her master. But what feels like minutes, now feels like hours and Sia can't help but begin to noticeably slow down. "Sensei." "Wait," Sia calls, gaining his attention. "Can we take a break?" We've been walking for hours. Naruto doesn't say anything at first as he looks forward. The gas is starting to get to you. We've only been walking for 20 minutes, Naruto says, his tone matter of fact. Sia blinks, completely surprised and confused. The temple isn't far ahead. Naruto then walks over to her. And in a single movement, she is on his back, much to her quiet embarrassment. Sia grumbles to herself, but she ends up relaxing, enjoying hanging off of him. Why have you been so upset with me? Naruto questions, breaking the silence. I don't know what you're talking about, Sia denies casually, brushing him off. Naruto just snorts, and she can picture a smirk on his face, but in reality, he doesn't have one. My point exactly. Sia remains quiet, not answering as she gathers her thoughts. Deciding to swallow her pride, she speaks up, how come you never told me you were a Jedi? Naruto furrows his brow very slightly, but he relaxes. Now it makes sense. I was a Jedi, and because you never asked. What the hell? It doesn't work like that, Naruto. Sia growls, duh. Chi is something you tell to someone up front, you idiot. Perhaps, if I was currently a Jedi, Naruto responds with a shrug. But I'm not, and to me, it's nothing worth boasting about or sharing right off the bat. But I'm not ashamed of it either, which is why if you had asked, I would have told you. Simple as that, Naruto explains, which Sia rolls her eyes, now even more upset. But I didn't tell you. Because I didn't feel it was important, he shares honestly. It is important, very important. I see that now, I'm sorry. The rage Sia felt suddenly dies as she did not expect that. She honest why expected more smart-ass comments or for him to brush her off. But to apologize so easily. It was so, Naruto. I know how you feel about Jedi. I should have told you sooner instead of letting you learn it from someone else. I'm sorry, but now that you know, does it change how you feel about me? Sia felt like a toad was in her throat, because even though it sounded like a simple question, there wasn't a simple easy answer. She couldn't just say yes, or say no, because her answer isn't yes or no. We're here, Naruto cuts in, and Sia focuses on front of her to see that they were standing at the steps of a rather large dome-like building. It was made out of aged stone, looking abandoned and covered in moss and fungus. Naruto set her down, then began walking up the stairs, the doors to the temple opening revealing darkness. However, Naruto did not falter or hesitate, walking into the darkness without fear. Sia follows her master, but isn't as confident, making sure to hang on to him. As they waded through the dark abyss, and she wonders if Naruto had built the temple himself. This temple is a trap, she hears Naruto's voice cut in. It's immersed in the dark side of the Force, stay close. Sia nods, but oddly enough feels as if she is being watched once again. As she stays by him, they encounter random traps that she can't see at all but knows would have easily killed her if it hadn't been for her sensei. Then she feels him stop, so she stops too, and she hears what sounds like slowly opening doors. The doors open, revealing a dimly lit round room which is completely empty. Naruto approaches the center of the room and Sia stays back watching. As he steps forward, a pedestal begins to rise from the ground, the pressure in the room suddenly increasing. Sia strains underneath the pressure, finding it hard to breathe, but she watches Naruto look completely calm as the pedestal rises, offering a small box. With a wave of his hand, the box opened and the entire room began to glow red. A shiver runs down Sia's spine as Naruto pulls out some kind of container that looks to be made out of some kind of metal, and traps the glowing red stone inside. It's then Sia feels move me. NT, and she quickly hurries over to Naruto, who turns just as a large group of dark blue armored men wielding blasters storm in, circle around them and aim, ready to fire. Sia then looks to her Ensei, who doesn't seem fazed just as they hear footsteps, and following in is a black-robed masked figure who stops before them. Sia and Naruto study the person, who has the build of male. Dressed in, head to toe in black clothing and a black robe, he also wears a black helmet that reminds Naruto of a Mandalorian. There is silence, as the two black-robed figures gaze at each other, neither moving until a chuckle comes from the stranger. Their voice altered into a deep tone full of bass. I must thank you for retrieving the gem. I have been trying effortlessly for months, Sia frowns as she glares at the man who then extends his hand. Now, please, hand it over. Who the hell do you think you are, jackass? Sia scowls as she honestly feels offended. Then looks to her master who holds a blank expression on his face. Staring at the man who still has his hand out. This is your only warning. Naruto speaks finally, his tone calm and controlled. Let us pass, or face the consequences. Sia glances from Naruto to the masked man, who simply chuckles, taking back his hand. I can't do that, the man says with a small shrug. And to answer your question, youngling, my name is Jinsei and I am a commander of the Divine Will. Sia narrows her eyes for a moment, trying to see if that name rung a bell or anything. Once it didn't, she grunts and crosses her arms, giving him an uncaring look. Never heard of ya. Hang around Uzumaki here, and you will learn. Jinsei responds out of amusement, and for some reason Sia began to feel unsure of herself. Once more Uzumaki. The gem, Jinsei orders as he raises his hand. A signal for his men to fire. Or do you want to risk losing another apprentice? Then, as if glancing over to Sia, he mentions, and one so young too. Sia doesn't want to take her eyes off the man who was clearly their enemy, nor does she feel exactly safe being in such a hostile situation with so many guns in her face, but she does for a second look to her master to see if there is any emotion on his face. But she sees nothing, not even a hint of concern or fear, which only creates more questions in her mind. Without warning, Jinsei's men fire, but the moment they do so, boom. Sia opens her eyes to see that they are no longer in the temple or anywhere close to the explosion. In fact, looking around, she sees she is by Naruto's side still. In the ship. Wait, did we just run away? Sia demands just as Naruto walks off, telling Cortana to get them off planet. Naruto. Sia calls, chasing after him. Why did we? Sia. Go man the guns. Naruto cuts her off as he sits in his seat. We're fighting our way out of here. While a little bit annoyed, Sia goes off to do as ordered just as she feels the ship readying the engines to take off. Cortana start looking for a clear path for hyperspace. Naruto orders as he floors the engines, flying the ship to get past the atmosphere, but as they do so they are currently being fired at by incoming star fighters. R2, triple up those shields. Naruto barks out, his eyes focused purely on everything coming at him while maneuvering as best he can. While R2 is readying the shields for a third time, Sia is focused on destroying any fighter that comes within her line of sight. Hang on tight, gang, Naruto warns, piloting the ship through the oncoming fighters while making it through the last layer of the planet. Thrusters, he voices, which Cortana pushes on and the ship's thrusters blast them through the atmosphere and into space. Holy shit, what is that thing? Quote, Tisk, Star Destroyer, Naruto resp. ONDS to Sia as they all look at the Star Destroyer that is waiting for him, their guns at the ready. Cortana, how is that jump coming along? It was fine, till this asshole showed up. They are too close for us to make the jump. Roger that. Making a sharp turn to the left, Naruto stomps on the gas heading to free space, deciding to go around the destroyer that began to shoot at them. Set the coordinates. Cortana however seems unsure, and even voices her opinion. Are you sure you want to do that? Just do it. Fighters are coming in hot. And there are lots of them. Sia informs as she sees star fighters swarming out from the Star Destroyer. Just keep shooting. Naruto barks back as he focuses, his mind beginning to block out all distraction as well as his eyes. The constant of the ship and the blaster fire they were taking as well as the screams of the fighters zipping past or exploding turned into silence. His sapphire blue eyes began to glow, the Rinnegan pulsing to life with an ominous glow. Sia, who is still doing her best shooting at the fighters coming at them, takes notice of a strange physical distortion beginning to form. Wait a second. Sia breaths as he sees an actual vortex begin to form in the middle of space, and then there was a loud boom. Sia's eyes widened when she sees that an actual black hole had been ripped in space, bringing in all the IGHTERS that aren't strong enough to fight its pull. As the enemy is being pulled into mysterious oblivion, the destroyer too begins to being pulled in. Sensei, are you seeing this? Naruto doesn't respond, too focused. His Rinnegan glows bright while tears of blood run down his face. It's ready. Cortana voices and Naruto punches it, making the jump into hyperspace. Once they do, he closes his eyes, allowing Cortana to take over the controls while he holds his aching head. Naruto, are you okay? She asks, concerned as he manages to stand but only on shaky knees. Why yeah, I'm fine, he breathes slowly while he hears Sia's excited steps come from down the hall. He hears Sia's demands on what just happened, but just before he can answer her, the room suddenly goes dark. Sensei. Sia gasps as she watches him crumble, but catches him. Naruto. Naruto. She shakes but he doesn't budge, but she looks to Cortana who appears. Sia, take him to the med bay. Sia nods as she tries to pick him up, then something in her head clicks. She then looks to Cortana in confusion. We have a med bay. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.